I wasn't attacking you. I was just counting the heads. So it is only 3 minutes after the start time, and we do have a quorum. So let's begin. Some chairs give a long speech about the right of the board to have these meetings in Zoom by order of the governor. I just gave that speech. I'm not going to go any further. I think the best way to dive into this is to just start with our first update. Is it Noreen? Are you going to take that over?
I think Hudson River Park is the first item on the agenda, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. So, hi, I'm Noreen Doyle from the Hudson River Park Trust, and I'm joined here today by a number of my colleagues. I'll point out Dan Kurtz in particular, will be doing most of the presentation, and then also David Tewksbury from Chelsea Piers. When we were last here talking to you about Chelsea Piers, I believe it was September, and we were telling you that we were well on our way in our negotiations with Chelsea Piers for a new lease. And we gave you at that point the kind of backstory and the rationale for it. Chelsea Piers had approached us initially about needing a longer term, and we saw a number of opportunities for the park and improvements for the park at that point. So when we were there in September, we thought we would be back very soon, about to start what is called our significant action process. When we have an action that is going to be longer than 10 years, such as this proposed new lease, we are obligated under our statute to have a formal public hearing and public comment period process. And we are literally about to launch that process. And because that process is so formal, our longstanding practice is to also do the informal work of coming to the community board to have a more interactive discussion and make sure that we can answer questions where possible and really engage with you the way we normally do. So that's what we're here to do tonight. So with that said, I'm going to introduce Dan Kurtz, who most of you will remember. Dan was our longtime executive vice president and CFO. He stepped down from those positions, but he still works for the trust on a limited basis, including helping us get to this finish line with respect to the Chelsea Piers lease negotiations. So rather than introducing our full team at this point, we have a number of people here because we want to be ready to answer your questions if you have them. I'll let Dan get started. And I think Janine, the presentation probably could go up. Okay, thank you. Dan?
Dan, you're still muted.
You got the whole world here, Noreen.
Okay, hear me now? Am I good?
We like CB4.
Okay, all right.
Welcome, Dan.
Welcome. Hello. Let's get started here. So good evening, everybody. Tonight I'm going to present to you the Cliff Notes version of a 250-page lease agreement. The full lease and more detailed lease abstract is about to be posted on the Trust website. You'll have time and the opportunity to read these, I think, before the next committee meeting in March. And I believe that we will be back in March to answer detailed questions after you've had the opportunity to study this matter further. Hopefully, however, this presentation will give you a good head start for when you look at the documents and think about the new lease. So as Noreen indicated, when we were here last in September, we told you that Chelsea Piers was our largest commercial tenant, our biggest rent payer, but they operate under an out-of-date 1994 New York Department of Transportation lease that the trust inherited when we were formed in 1998.
Sorry.
Does this flip? Yep.
Yeah, no, you're not able to do that, Dan, so you have to say advance the slide. Okay, there you go.
Advance the slide. Thank you. You can advance the slide one more time. So what we hope to accomplish now is to get a new modern lease with updated provisions to replace the out-of-date 1994 lease. We hope to realize opportunities to enhance revenue, get more money. And we are looking to further the integration of Chelsea Piers with the park. As you know, Chelsea Piers was constructed before there was a Hudson River Park. It wasn't really possible for the architects and planners who did Chelsea Piers to fully anticipate what was going to unfold over the next 20, 30 years. We're happy that we've been so successful and have attracted many, many people to the west side at this location. But the time has come, and it would be advantageous to implement additional measures to better integrate Chelsea Piers with Hudson River Park. So flip the slide. Oh, thank you. So we see the new lease as a way to reach these goals. So I'm going to give you sort of the key terms. So the first one is a new 34-year lease, 34-year term with one option for one 10-year renewal. So there can be up to 44 years in total under the new lease. The current lease expires in 21 years. However, a longer term is needed and David Tewksbury, when he was here in September, explained this better than I can, to support renewed capital investment by Chelsea Piers, particularly in the pile repair and other capital investments at Chelsea Piers, to give security for long-term occupancy to the business users and tenants at Chelsea Piers, and from the trust perspective, to secure long-term benefits to the park. We are going to be revising slightly some of the use provisions, but they are primarily as you know them now. So sports and recreation. In the new lease, there'll be a new minimum amount of 330,000 square feet of sports and recreation use. Although Chelsea Piers is well known as a recreation facility, in the 1994 Department of Transportation lease, there's no minimum requirement in that lease for sports and recreation. The new lease has a minimum requirement. Restaurants and catering, you know that Chelsea Piers currently operates that. Bluestone is an independent restaurant at the end of Pier 62. Marina and cruise boats, Chelsea Piers directly operates the marina at this time. And cruises are operated by Hornblower and Classic Cruise Lines. Movie, TV, and media production, as many of you know, Blacklist and Law and Order are produced here. Office, basically on the second floor of the head house. Chelsea Piers is allowed to have museum and exhibition use. They don't presently, but it's a provision that is in the new lease. They can have this use going forward. And retail use, there is a provision that allows retail presently. The retail use is quite minimal right now. We're going to expand permissible retail uses to allow art galleries, in as much as the Chelsea neighborhood is, an established neighborhood and has many art galleries. So it's a logical extension for Chelsea Piers retail use. Next slide, please. So along with these new uses and the use provision come use controls. So the key ones are, I will go through them. There's a new provision for trust review and expansion of, I guess, what I'll call the busier uses, which are catering and restaurants and retail uses above a certain designated size. At least 2/3 of the uses along the Sunset Strip interior walkway is supposed to be now public facing. So those would be food, sports, recreation, or retail uses that people can walk into. Our goal here is to give more of a neighborhood feel for the interior of Chelsea Piers. On the prohibited side, nightclubs and other uses that generate noise beyond the business spaces will not be allowed. Dinner cruises will not be allowed to operate as floating restaurants or party spaces while docked at the piers. And to protect the estuary, the life in the river, there's a prohibition against cigarette-style speedboats and jet skis. So those cannot operate from Chelsea Piers to protect the fish. And to protect the people, or for the convenience of the people, we are expanding public toilets at Chelsea Piers. So there's going to be two, one as is now presently at Pier 62, and there's a requirement for a second one at Pier 59. So they'll be at either end of Chelsea Piers. Next slide, please. Thank you. On dollars, we will be getting a higher base rent. $4.4 million, increasing by a cap CPI every 2 years. Chelsea Piers is our largest private source of revenue for the park. They're the second biggest source of revenue overall. The largest is the parking at Pier 40. Chelsea Piers is a close number 2. We will also be getting additional scheduled base rent increases in excess of the CPI, the scheduled CPI increases. And those are going to be 7.5% in 2032, 10% in 2043, and then another 5% in 2056 if there's a lease renewal. In the existing lease, there's no scheduled lease bumps such as this. We also get percentage rent at Chelsea Piers, which is a share of their business revenue. And we've adjusted the formula there so that we'll be getting basically 5% of revenue over a designated upper threshold. It's currently 4%. So we'll be getting more money as Chelsea Piers generates more sales. And then we'll be introducing a new transaction rent. So if and when there's a lease transaction at Chelsea Piers, we'll be getting 2.5% of those proceeds. There's currently no transaction rent in the existing lease. We will continue to get a payment in lieu of real estate taxes or pilot equal to full taxes. This is, a very significant revenue source for the trust. I believe in the current fiscal year, we're slated to get $4.4 million of payment in lieu of real estate taxes from Chelsea Piers. Next slide, please.
Just interrupt for a second. So just to make it clear, because we were asked questions about this at the advisory council, the aggregate rent currently combining the pilot and the base rent, Dan, is about $8.5 million annually a year.
Yeah, that's right. So that is by far the largest private source of revenue to the trust from one of our tenants. On the expense side, HRPT doesn't have any obligation with regard to operating expenses or infrastructure repairs. Those are all borne by Chelsea Piers. However, there will be a provision in the new lease that HRPT will consider and may provide partial rent credits for the cost of, enhanced public access improvements above and beyond what Chelsea Piers is going to be required to do under the lease. And these public access improvements will be described in a minute by David Tewksbury. Also significantly, there are new provisions with regard to, what I'll call community consultations. So as you know, Chelsea Piers currently does list, I believe, their job openings with CB4. They do this on a voluntary basis. Under the lease, it'll be a requirement. And also as a new provision, Chelsea Piers will be required to meet annually with CB4 and the public to review their performance during the prior year and to solicit comments from both the CB4 membership and from members of the public. They'll then be required to respond with proposed solutions to the concerns that are raised in that public meeting. And HRBT will follow up and help the community board follow up with regard to those response. And then finally, Chelsea Piers will be implementing pedestrian access improvements. I'm sorry, next slide. Pedestrian access improvements, new wayfinding signage, and they will expand their current on-site pedestrian and traffic management effort so that this will extend across the entire site. So rather than go into that in detail, I'm now going to yield to David Tewksbury of Chelsea Piers to describe in detail pedestrian access, wayfinding signage, and traffic management and pedestrian management. Unless you want me to break for questions, I think I'll switch to David.
We should ask you, do you want us to do questions here, or do you want to just continue with the full presentation?
I think we should.
My gut says you should finish the presentation.
Fine, agreed. Okay, great. Just checking.
Okay, thank you. My name is David Tewksbury. I'm one of the principals of Chelsea Piers Management. Myself and my two partners built Chelsea Piers a little over 25 years ago. I would like to thank Dan, and I'd like to tell you all, if you ever need a really good lease negotiated, hire Dan Kurtz. He's pretty good. Our roots with Community Board 4 in the park are very deep. As many of you know, Chelsea Piers actually predates the Hudson River Park Act. And about 30 years ago, my partners and I were actually meeting with the CB4 Waterfront Committee, sharing our vision for what the Chelsea Piers could be. We've worked closely with the past CB4 leadership in planning out much of the public access that you see today at Chelsea Piers. And I think we've always been a very engaged and enthusiastic supporter of the Hudson River Park. It's a great park and it's important to us. When we met you a few months ago, we shared information about Chelsea Piers and why we are working to finalize a new lease with HRPT. And tonight I've been asked to share some of the initial designs for public access improvements that are required by our new lease. Our business is known for sports and recreation. It's really the core of our mission. We've built a very strong local, regional, and national reputation in the world of youth sports, and we're very proud of that. What we've done well, but we do good. And
David, you might need to catch up your slides to where you are.
You're caught up, and if you go to the next slide, we're on pace. And although sports and recreation is what we are known for, it is the non-sports businesses at Chelsea Piers that really enable us to be the largest rent payer in the Hudson River Park. We own and operate Manhattan's largest TV and studio production facilities. We manage New York City's largest marina, and Abigail Kirsch Culinary operates some of the most active event spaces in the city. There really is always something, and often many things, going on at Chelsea Piers. Next slide, please. From day one of our lease discussions with HRPT, it was made clear that improving public access to the waterfront and Chelsea Piers' connections to the Hudson River Park were of paramount importance. And our interests are fully aligned on this issue. We want to be better integrated with the park. We want the Chelsea Piers waterfront between 17th and 22nd Streets to be seamlessly integrated with the park. Pedestrians and runners should flow through Chelsea Piers along the beautiful 5-block stretch of waterfront without thinking twice about what is the natural pathway. Next slide, please. We have existing public access. There are a number of areas where public access flows into the piers, but it's clear that as the park has been developed, our public access can be improved, and we've identified a number of ways where it can be significantly improved. Next slide, please. Let's start off with the Eastern Service Road sidewalk. And this is the concrete sidewalk that runs along the eastern face of the building, and it's used by quite a few people. And one of the reasons it's used by quite a few people is our connections to the waterfront at Pier 59 and Pier 52 could be better, which would move a lot more people to the waterfront. Next slide, please. I showed and I mentioned all the other uses at Chelsea Piers because that is what creates the need for the service road we have in front of the building. And improving the pedestrian flow along the service road was HRPT's first request, including they wanted to expand the width of the existing sidewalk. And since we've run Chelsea Piers for the past 25 years, we have and we run it very actively. We own and operate most of the building businesses on site. We get a very deep understanding of how the site works and what its pressure points are and what it takes to make everything run safely and successfully. We engaged a professional traffic engineer, a company by the name of ACON, to help us evaluate ways to improve pedestrian flow or widen the sidewalk. Could we lose a travel lane? Could we move trucks and buses into the garage spaces? They were tasked with finding solutions. The net result was that ACOM advised that alignment changes to the service road were not possible There's just too many competing and compounding demands for use of that space, whether it's studio support, buses dropping off passenger groups for events or marina, or just the volume of people coming for sports and recreation. The site is simply too busy. And, you know, with 25 years of operating experience, we basically concurred with that conclusion. AECOM also advised us that park access to the waterfront could be greatly improved, which would provide a more attractive and safer pathway for pedestrians and runners. Next slide, please. When AECOM did a detailed review of existing conditions, they suggested that we could improve the functionality of the existing service road sidewalk by removing obstructions, the various type of obstructions that are between 17th and 22nd Street. So that would maximize available pedestrian space. This plan details the locations of all signposts, grades, trash and recycling receptacles that can and will be removed from the sidewalk area. While this level of change may not make everyone happy, we do believe we have identified far more significant and meaningful improvements for pedestrians in waterfront access. And there'll be more on that to follow in a moment. Next slide, please. As Dan mentioned, we have formalized our traffic management and safety plan for the site. While we've always voluntarily helped manage the 22nd Street crosswalk, we will now be deploying our guest services staff on a regular basis to key locations based upon the different levels of on-site activity. You know, the basic goal is to make everything work in a safe and pedestrian-friendly manner. Next slide, please. So we get to our existing conditions, and these are really the existing conditions of public access. Chelsea Piers was constructed before the Hudson River Park was built, and until recently, Pier 58 and below were vestiges of pre-park days. The good news is that we now found ourselves in the middle of a fully built-out park, and we recognize that there are significant opportunities to better integrate Chelsea Piers with this beautiful park. Our two big connections are at Pier 59 and Pier 62. And there's a huge opportunity to create greatly improved connections at these locations, in essence, allowing the Hudson River Park and those traveling in it to flow through Chelsea Piers in a natural and enjoyable way. As you can see from the images on the screen, if you look at the top two photographs, the existing Pier 59 connection is small and awkward. It needs to be expansive, inviting, and obvious. At the bottom left, the pathway into and through Pier 59 is not inviting. On the bottom right, the Pier 50, the access to the waterfront walkway at Pier 62 is also constricted, and it's not clearly marked in terms of integrating with the park. Generally, there's a lack of directional wayfinding and park signage at all three principal Chelsea Piers access points, and those would be access points for pedestrians. And they are Pier 59, Pier 62, and the 22nd Street crosswalk at the northeast corner of the building. Next slide, please. This is an image of the Pier 59 access. It's the same image as earlier, but you can just see that gate entrance, which is it's open, you know, from 6 in the morning till 10 p.m. generally, is just about 12 feet wide. And most people who aren't going to Chelsea Piers generally just walk past it if they're walking in a northerly direction, because it's not clear what it does or where it goes. Next slide, please. This is an aerial image of that same existing walkway, and you can see the new Pier 58 plaza in the foreground. This is clearly the #1 opportunity to open up significantly improved waterfront access for the public. Next slide, please. And this is the design that has been worked on for quite some time to open up that Pier 59 access. It aligns with 17th Street. Instead of 12 feet wide, the opening, I believe, is 46 feet wide. There's a direct line of sight to a new entrance portal. You can see with the green CP above it. There's wayfinding, signage, and lighting. You know, the image really speaks for itself. The access will be open, inviting, and a very, very obvious path. Also, our future signage on our south facade will be strictly Chelsea Piers and/or tenant signage, and we will not have marketing or advertising signage, which we have traditionally had over the years. Next slide, please. This is the same access boardwalk from a lower angle, and it gives you a better idea how prominent, large, and hopefully inviting this new access improvement will be for people. And that's, again, this is the Pier 58 plaza in the foreground, and this is connecting either, you can connect all the way to take the perimeter walkway, or you will be able to enter in our Pier 59 portal if you want a shortcut to the waterfront western promenades. Next slide, please. Janine, could you, thank you very much. The existing Pier 59 connection, this entrance is small and awkward. The pathway through Pier 59 is not inviting. And we think we can do quite a bit better. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is significant, you can see that it's significantly enlarged. A pair of existing double doors is replaced with a 60-foot wide portal. Overhead pivot doors will stay open most of the year. An expansive window glazing will bring natural light into the pier. And once you step in here, you really have a line of sight to the waterfront. If you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, I'm showing you this slide. This is a key map, and I'm showing it because I'm now going to show you renderings from the number 3 and the number 4 location, which are on the left-hand side of the image. So they're from inside the pier shed building. Next slide, please. This is the existing condition in Pier 59. The pedestrian sidewalk and the existing double door entrance and exit. Next slide. And this is what the newly reconstructed entrance portal will look like. The sidewalk is significantly larger, and instead of 2 entrance doors that swing, there's these overhead pivot doors, which will remain open most of the time. And in inclement winter weather, when those are closed, there's large pedestrian doors on both sides. The other thing to notice is we have proposing screening for the upper levels of the parking stackers that are within the garage to make it all a little more pleasing. And there will be, although it's not the final design is not completed, decorative lighting that matches the routing of the pathway. Next slide, please. This is the view from inside the golf club, right as you pass the golf club and are about to hit what we call Sunset Strip in the exterior western walkway. And this is the connection point to basically that 1,000-foot long waterfront walkway that takes you up to Pier 62. Next slide. This is a rendering of exactly the same angle, but on the right-hand side of this image, we have removed what is currently part of our marina management office in order to increase the size and the visibility of the physical connection to the waterfront walkways. It's great to have basically a portal that's twice the size, but also the increased visibility to the waterfront is very important because it makes the pathway obvious and natural. Next slide, please. This is up at Pier 62. The principal problem with this existing access is a complete lack of wayfinding signage. And as you look to the left-hand side, you see wayfinding signage that is actually starting at the Pier 62, the 22nd Street crossing, which will guide people towards the park and the waterfront. And people traveling southbound within the park will also have clearly marked pathways to guide them to the waterfront walkway. One thing you don't see in this image, but it will also happen as part of the improvement work, will be the installation of new benches and planters along the entire western walkway. They'll also be situated a little closer to the railing so that the pedestrian pathway will be approximately 4 or 5 feet wider, the clear pathway, than it is today. Next slide, please. This is our preliminary design for wayfinding signage, pathway markers, key maps, and the lighting. One more slide. So this again is just these numbers 1 through 5 represent the areas of improvement that we will be working on. And you just saw the high-level design overview of all of that work. Next slide, please. We're pretty excited about the opportunity to better connect Chelsea Piers with the Hudson River Park and the public with the waterfront. And would be happy to answer any questions that we can at this time. And I'd again like to thank you all for taking the time to listen. Thank you.
Thank you. And I take it this is time for committee members to put up hands. There they go. Roberta, please.
Sure. I just wanted to thank you so much for the presentation. It's all very exciting. I'm a lifelong New Yorker and I have so many happy memories at Chelsea Piers throughout my life. So I'm really excited about Chelsea Piers continuing its relationship with the park. And I really appreciate some of the improvements to both the shed, the wayfinding, but there was kind of one piece where I did want to express a bit of concern and was hoping that you could offer a little bit more detail because I think that the community would be interested in understanding this a little bit better. So you mentioned that it would not be feasible to widen the sidewalks around between Pier 59 and Pier 61, I believe. And that's the part of Chelsea Piers that has kind of the parking garage and the entrance and exit there, as well as the film studio. And I was hoping you could walk us through a little bit more as to why you came to that conclusion, because I mean, to me, that I think would be the biggest improvement that Chelsea Piers could add to the park to give back pedestrian space and take it back both from these studio trucks that, frequently, spew what I guess smells like gasoline pollution and take up the sidewalks. I'd really love to understand better why that's not a possibility here, please.
I'd be happy to respond. Chelsea Piers is a fairly complex business in that in many ways it's like a 3-ring circus or a 6-ring circus. We have, again, we have the largest film and TV production studios in New York City. We have a vibrant marina, which includes a large dinner cruise business. and we have a significant banquet and event operation going on. Those are the big economic drivers of the property. We're not able to pay the rent based on general skating and kids gymnastics classes and running summer camps. Those are the economic drivers that make it possible for us to pay $8.5 million a year to the trust and occupancy costs. And, you know, we've funded another $75 million in pile repairs over the last 10 years. But logistically, things like buses do not fit into the garage. They can't turn in. Once they're in there, they couldn't make their way through. So it's physically impossible for buses. So if Spirit Cruises is running a senior citizens group on a big lunch and is bringing in 6 buses, all of those 6 buses need to unload on the roadway. The film and TV production studios, we don't really do film, we just do TV, because film is too vehicle intensive. TV is much more manageable because you know, they're permanent. Most of the things take place inside the building. Having said that, even those minimal requirements on all shoot days take up the western lane and the eastern lane, leaving us one travel lane to get by. If you come to the piers in an evening, you know, almost any evening, but particularly from April through December, you could have 1,000 cars coming in and out of there in the course of a 2-hour period as events, boats, and other activities load and unload. It's a really delicate balance. We manage a full-time staff of about 30 guest services staff members who really do nothing but direct pedestrians and vehicles in and out of the site and try to maintain safe conditions. If you took away a lane, literally the site could break down at any minute. You know, if a bus stopped and a car stopped, we would be backing up through the 22nd Street crosswalk onto the West Side Highway, literally in a matter of minutes. I mean, the site just works, but we work very hard to make it function. It's almost like balancing on a knife edge sometimes, but usually, you know, on 19 out of 20 nights, it goes pretty smoothly. So it's maybe a long answer to a short question.
Just for clarification, does the film studio require 2 vehicle lanes? Could you explain why? And is there any other place to put the film studio's vehicles other than the vehicle travel lanes?
We have 2 large productions. We have Law and Order, which Universal Television does, and we have Blacklist, which is done by Sony TV. It's the nature of the beast. These are the vehicles, they're their core support vehicles that they use. And if they go out on the road to do on location work, they actually add vehicles to the fleet. We have a very streamlined list of vehicles that they're allowed to have on site. But we get the smaller trucks inside Pier 61 for Law and Order, and the larger trucks and the balance of the Blacklist support vehicles have to be on the East Roadway. I mean, it's been that way for 25 years.
And that's because they don't fit into the parking garage.
You can't get the large vehicles into the garage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Marinell?
Hi, everyone, and thank you for your time for presenting to us this evening. I just have a quick clarification. So the original lease was 30 years, I'm assuming, long, because it's coming up for renewal, and the new proposed lease will be 44 years long. I mean, potentially, but the 10-year option is not a Hudson River Park Trust option. It's a Chelsea Piers option. So it's essentially a 44-year lease as far as the HRPT is concerned. Is that right?
The original lease in 1994 was 30 years. Then in 1996, the lease with the state was amended to allow up to 49 years. So it was a longer lease initially, up to 49 years. The new term, there's 21 years left on that original lease. And the new proposed lease is, as you say, 34 years for the initial term and then a 10-year option to renew. And that's Chelsea Piers' option for a total of 44 years.
Understood. Thank you. And secondly, I do want to echo what Roberta just said. It is a little bit, when I understand that that you hired consultants that looked at the situation and essentially came up with nothing and said, well, we can move some signage around and maybe some trash cans around, but other than that, there's really not very much we can do. I feel like the bigger concern here was not really addressed. That's
So-
no question.
I mean, I'll just jump in for a second to reiterate something that David said. HRPT very, very much started off in the same spot that you're all in terms of asking these kinds of questions. Even widening the sidewalk 2 feet, like, can we do that? A lot of those same kinds of questions. And we dug deeply with the engineers, with going on site, looking at various things, including with some board members, trying to figure out what the opportunities were. I will say, having been at Chelsea Piers at multiple times of the day, and I'm sure many of you have as well, that there are certainly times when, every inch of every piece of every driveway is filled. And what we can't knowingly allow is for vehicles to back up across the bikeway or onto the highway. Those are no-goes for us. So we did look at the basic principle that we've used throughout the park from our origin, which is trying where you can to separate pedestrians from vehicles as a general principle, and generally also using the waterfront, the water itself, as the place where pedestrians want to be. Chelsea Piers already had this pathway, but the access to that pathway is hidden, as David described. I mean, it's, basically most people won't figure it out. So our recent expansion of the Pier 59 Esplanade on the south and the ability to basically, for everyone moving from the south, basically try to capture them before they are dealing with the sidewalk along the frontage and invite them into the site. And then to a nice walk along the water where they connect to then the beautiful park at Pier 62 was something that we viewed as an opportunity. Obviously the same as the reverse path that applies as well. So essentially the principle that we are working with now that we think actually has a lot of merit is to do what the normal park behavior is, which is keep people on a waterside esplanade as much as possible and do everything that we can to direct people to that waterside esplanade, given the limitations on the service road. And again, we started in this with the same questions you're starting with tonight.
Noreen, let me just add that, because I, as a person, actually spent the first several months, as David can attest, really trying to explore every opportunity to widen the sidewalks or to put the driveways into non-vehicular use during certain days and hours. David can speak to this more directly, but, at the end of the day, there were these inherent limitations on the frontage, physical limitations. There was the garage entrances, the garages are in fairly heavy use. We mitigated that by getting a commitment from Chelsea Piers to place traffic managers at the garage entrances to try to manage that better, but it's an inherent limitation. Deliveries and service functions, by necessity all have to happen from the service road. That's why it's called a service road. And at different times during the day, there are goods being transported across the sidewalk. Again, if you look at the lease or when you look at the lease, you'll see that there's specific language about limiting that to the maximum extent that we can. And then lastly, if you, I don't know whether someone can pull up a map, but at the northeast corner of the building, there are only 2 lanes. So, which would give you sort of a preview, if you will, if you drop from 3 lanes to 2 lanes. And you'll see that the width there, though, is only 10 or 12 feet. So even if we were able to bring people or draw people to the sidewalk in front, there's sort of a natural, or there's a physical limitation there of a pinch point, which is, only 10 or 12 feet. And if that sidewalk gets very, very crowded in terms of people trying to use it at the same time, they're inevitably going to drift into the, into the driveway and create the type of conflict that Noreen just discussed. So we sort of are with you. This was, our first reaction was exactly the same as yours. We looked at it and we said, let's expand the sidewalk. What can we do? When we looked at the sidewalk against the building, and when David said he couldn't do that, we tried to get him to create a new sidewalk on the lane, which is adjacent to the bikeway. Again, I think David can speak to this more than I can, but it's not for lack of trying. So then we went to what we think is, maybe the next best thing, which is to create an inviting pathway through the facility. And not only just to create that pathway, but at both entrances, to Chelsea Piers on the north and the south, to implement improvements to make it inviting to people and make it obvious to people that this is sort of the natural pathway. So I agree with you. It would be great if we could have dropped a lane there. But we think we've come up with a solution, that serves the public, and, with the cooperation of Chelsea Piers to make that necessary investment, to make the improvements, to have garage and other traffic pedestrian managers, to make the interior more inviting, not just in terms of the pathway, but as I said, to place more retail type businesses, along that pathway. It'll also draw people through. And we think, as long-term future, also the people, people like to be next to the water. They don't necessarily like to be next to a service road. And I think when people see the benefits of the enhanced pathway through the facility, we're hoping, that this will encourage the public to use that and people will have a good experience.
Marty, I know I'm out of turn here, but if I could jump ahead of Alan and David, I may be able to bridge the gap here. Would
Only
that
if you
be
pay them some money.
I'm sorry?
Only if you pay Alan and David some money.
I don't know, guys, how much is it worth to you?
Go ahead.
We'll
ahead.
we'll negotiate. Disclaimer, as many of you know, I am a board member of the Hudson River Park Trust. I was one of the board members Noreen referenced that was involved in this work with Dan. I drove Dan up a wall because I still do not understand why the craft services truck has to be parked in the driveway and why on the western lane, and why the trucks on the eastern lane sit there all day for the days they go out on shoots. That being said, I do believe that this was the best deal that the trust could get. I don't like it. I am very skeptical about the way the signage is going to work. I think people are still going to try and use the driveway, this runners especially. You come on David's slides, with all due respect, David, downplay the feel when you're cutting through what is a parking garage when you come off the pier. I don't like it. I'm skeptical, but I do believe that this is the best deal that the trust could get negotiating with Chelsea Piers, given the reality that Chelsea Piers was there first and that we have been trying all this time to build a park around them as opposed to the other way around. If we could go back to square one, we could do this differently and we could make it work better and make everyone happy. But, we're dealing with the realities of the situation. I really do believe that, Dan and the team, Chris and whoever else was involved in the negotiations, got the best deal they can for the trust. I'm skeptical. I don't like it. But, when you're negotiating a contract, the sign of a good contract is nobody's happy at the end of the day because they didn't get everything they wanted. So with that, Alan, David, send me a bill, but, that's where I am. Because I am a board member, I have to vote present, not eligible. but I will tell you at the board level that I did support this lease.
Alan?
Thank you, Martin. Thanks, Lowell, for the clarification. Having been walking on Chelsea Piers since they were building it, I think it is what it is in a lot of sense. But I think, as was mentioned, the changes inside are super, and I think it will enhance people's experience on the inside of the piers. But David, I have a question. If all things work the way you hope they work, when do you start and when do you finish?
We would hope to start this year. The construction, David, I mean, we still need to finish the planning and the design process. I would say construction would start, David, in, shall we say, a year. I would say, public, working in a public space in a crowded area, it'll probably take a year and a half or 2 years to complete the interior improvements. The improvements on the south, the widened area over the water, require some approvals by, the agencies. So that'll probably take somewhat longer. But, we want to get started as soon as we can and get it done as soon as we can. And, the lease has incentives and requirements to move promptly.
Specifically, the Army Corps and the Department of Environmental Conservation are the kinds of agencies besides us that need to approve the overwater walkway. We would not be suggesting this if we didn't think it was approvable, but there is more work to do to get those kinds of approvals.
And in regards to the studios, there were some rumors, I would say probably pre-pandemic time.
Alan, before you finish that you're shifting the subject. I heard no completion date in mind. Alan's question was
the actual.
Yeah, you said it's going to take about a year and a half, almost, from the time they start.
The actual physical work of the construction should take no longer than a 6-month time period. And that could even be long. But obtaining the planning and permitting process could range from, I think, 6 to 24 months. 6 months with the New York City Building Department, and also going through the trust review process, and upwards of, we've gotten Army Corps of Engineer and DEC permits before. It's torture. The trust is committed to assist in any way they can, so we're hopeful that it's a 6 to 9 month process and not a 18 to 30 month process, but we just don't know at this point. The actual construction will be all planned, coordinated, bid, and we'll be ready to push the button to start, but we have to get those permits first.
Understood. So getting back to the studios, as we were saying, there was rumors flying around that their leases were not going to be renewed. Can you speak on your lease arrangements with them, and hopefully that you plan on keeping them there?
I hope they're staying there. Law and Order, NBC, Universal has a few more years left on their lease, and the Blacklist Sony Television production is currently making a final decision whether they are going to continue to shoot for an additional season, and they expect to. So they both have the rights to continue to produce within our facility.
And just a quick comment on the signage. I find, and folks have expressed the same thing about the vertical signs, those blue, they're very hard to read. Some of them indicate something about getting off the bike, which you would never see if you were riding a bike. I'm sure the trust put a lot of effort and money and design work into getting those signs, but in a lot of locations, we find that they're really not working well to provide information for folks. So, but I did want to turn my attention to Dan. When you spoke about the nightclub, is that the over by Pier 59? That are you getting? Are you evicting those? Was that a nightclub, the one that went in not too long ago, or that's not the one you're referring to about nightclubs?
No.
No. Okay.
No, it's just going forward. No nightclubs, and actually, we even set the bar a little bit more stringently. So no use there. That's, as public use, public eating, whatnot, and dancing or music. Noise cannot be emitted from that premises, meaning the business premises that's heard outside of the premises. So we know not only want to protect the neighborhood from booming noise, like cruise boats and nightclubs, but we also want to make sure that the experience, again, this is part of what we're trying to do to bring the public through. We don't want people have to, go through, a cauldron of noise and music and whatnot, as they go through the park space.
Right, and no one's being evicted now. There's no nuisance tenant now. This is just planning for the future.
Okay.
Right.
No, it's always been the opinion of CB4 that the venues on our side of 14th Street contribute about 75% of the income to the trust. With the increase in the rent that we're getting now, you see that going up at this point? Just an opinion, you don't have to,
Yeah, it'll increase marginally, yes.
But I'll also say, Alan, that because of the work that we've been doing at Pier 40 with respect to the roof and restoring some of the parking that we couldn't have there, there has been an increase in the income at Pier 40 as well recently. So we're not unmindful of other opportunities where we can.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's a great plan. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. David?
I think the proposed changes are all really great. One thing that occurs to me is that a lot of time has passed since Chelsea Piers originally was created. And one of the things that's changed since then is that cities around the world and New York have rethought their relationship to cars. We're now instituting congestion pricing. The City Planning Commission went from requiring a minimum number of parking spaces to be built along with residential developments to imposing a cap on the number of parking spaces. And the stated rationale of that is that if you limit parking, it discourages driving and reduces congestion and pollution. It occurs to me that if Chelsea Piers were being presented to us as a whole today, as if it were a new development, we might look at all of the parking spaces that are in it and take exception to them. It seems to me that there are entertainment and recreational uses that could go in that are more appropriate to a park than car parking. And it also occurs to me that maybe that additional lane that we'd like to see taken back for the public could be created by creating a new lane for your service vehicles that's just inside the front wall of Chelsea Market. Think of it almost as an open arcade. So perhaps those buses could be under an overhang and have protection for loading and offloading. And then the actual weather membrane would be pushed back into the building a little bit. And that could add that lane that we're all looking for outside of the building. And I know the buses take up a lot of room when they turn. You probably can't bring them inside because of their turning radii. But if they could simply queue parallel to the other lane, but under the roof of the existing piers, that might be a solution. Or maybe there's a way of doing angled parking for the buses in there. Have you thought about that?
That's totally unfeasible. That would cost probably $100 to $150 million and would materially disrupt a large percentage of everything we have going on the grade level of the pier.
Well, how about giving up some parking spaces inside for more park appropriate uses?
Let me just point out that the parking, they don't run, it's not a parking garage, for commuters and whatnot. All of the parking at Chelsea Piers is accessory. So it's all for, the users of Chelsea Piers, the businesses of Chelsea Piers. There's no long-term parking. There's no daily parking, for people, who work in the area. I don't know whether that's clear or not, but that is the case presently.
Can you tell me how many parking spaces there are?
David, there's 300 and something. Is that right?
Approximately 350 spaces that are available.
It seems like a lot to me.
just saying, in terms of a facility of this size and the number of tenants, I would say it's not very large. One could argue that it should be smaller, but by way of comparison, parking spaces at Pier 40, I believe, were at about 1,800, 1,900, just to give you a comparison.
Sorry, you're making a different point there, David, and I hear you. You're making a point about, as that if you were looking at a fresh project today, it's one of the points you would be making to us or anybody during the planning process.
Right.
So David's point is that even though it's not in the planning process, some of that parking might be alternatively used if it were a new project. It's not a new project, so you would have to revision the parking places, and I think that's what David was asking for.
Yeah, my point was that since we're taking a fresh look at a lot of aspects of Chelsea Piers, maybe this is one that we would look at, since it seems to me that the take on parking is, it's a few decades behind the times, which is understandable because it hasn't changed in a few decades.
David, thank you. I'm going to go in the way I see the hands, even though I think you've already spoken, Roberta. Am I right?
That's true. I can make it quick. It's just another quick question about pedestrian access. So the presentation, I think Lowell touched on this, that the presentation focused on the access points between sheds 59 and 61, but didn't offer renderings for the parts of the sheds that are driveways, so parts of the parking lot that are the driveways, entrances and exits. And I think that as a pedestrian walking through the park, that can be one of the more challenging parts to navigate. And then I believe Dan mentioned something called traffic managers, and that they might be there in order to move people through. And I was hoping that you could expand that and just explain any modifications or plans that you'll implement to prevent conflict between pedestrians and vehicles at those entry and exit points of the driveways.
Would it be helpful to pull up the diagram plan again for this, or does everyone have a visual?
Probably be helpful.
Thank you. Wonderful, Janine.
Sure. Can you just remind me of the slide number, please?
I think the one almost right. Is this the end or the beginning?
That's the end.
Okay, I think just go one before this. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Mhm.
So the place, Roberta, that you were talking about is that David was showing, the garage area is basically the area from 3 to close the corner by 5. If you move the 5 closer to the left-hand side of the screen, if you're looking at it, that's the place where the walkway would go through the garage. And that's because while there is this continuous path around the perimeter of all the piers, including Pier 59, David can correct me, but you can't take people directly from across Pier 59 because of the golf driving range that's there. You'd be hit by balls. David, I have that right?
That is correct. In the morning, when the weather's nice, we do get quite a few joggers who run the perimeter of the piers because they like the distance, but generally it's not a convenient way to get to the waterfront.
So basically, right. So from obviously from at the number 2 there, you saw the rendering drawing people from the Esplanade into the new portal. Hopefully that does the trick by itself with the combination of the very wide new portal doors, etc. And then I think that the goal is to intercept people at other places and try to get them to stay on, at number 5, move along number 5, essentially, if they're heading south back to 4. And I think the visitor service people and the wayfinding system are basically the plan for trying to achieve that. But David or Dan, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so there shouldn't be a pedestrian vehicular conflict vis-a-vis vehicles parking in the Pier 59 area on the south here, because the larger sidewalk will hug the other side. So there shouldn't be a conflict there. Places that require attention are the crossings at the Pier 60 garage and at the Pier 61 garage. So at those locations, depending on volume, Chelsea Piers is committed to put a traffic manager, a pedestrian manager, a traffic manager. And we also anticipate having improved crosswalk markings at those locations to both indicate that for the pedestrians that this is the natural route across, and also, to have sufficient markings for drivers so that they can be aware that there are pedestrians ahead, that it's a pedestrian crossing. So those are the 2 areas I think that will need the most attention here, because if we're successful and we have more pedestrians and joggers going along the area that's identified as 5, those garage crossings can be potentially, a greater volume of people there, and potentially more potential conflict if there's a larger number of vehicles. So it's definitely going to require active traffic management at those locations.
So
slide 17 has the location of the traffic managers.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Just a quick, 2 quick follow-up questions to that. One, is there a particular volume you have in mind about what would trigger traffic managers? And 2, are you at all considering, and I think you were based on the renderings, lighting improvements to improve visibility of pedestrians?
I think I'll yield to David on that.
In the first part, thank you. The first part of the question was, what's our strategy in terms of timing?
No,
Is there a trigger? Is there a trigger in terms of traffic volume? And then second, do you anticipate doing lighting improvements?
It's more that we manage to peak activity periods. So that sort of starts like on weekdays with after school. You get big pulses between like 4 and 7 p.m. coming in and out, and for generally parents bringing their kids in to do sports and recreation. You also get a pretty heavy volume when events are running, when they're loading in between, say, 6:30 and 7:30 p.m. and then unloading again between 10 and 11. Weekends are generally very, very busy from September through June. Saturday's a little busier than Sunday. So we staff and locate our guest services personnel really based upon what's happening sort of on regularly scheduled volume that we know about, as well as any special activities going on. A Spirit Cruises boat coming in requires a lot of attention because they're going to unload, 300, 400, 500 passengers sometimes, in a matter of 30 minutes. So we have to safely get them out of the boats, onto the pedestrian ways, to their vehicles, be it a bus or a car, or exiting the site and moving off at 22nd Street. So again, every day is actively managed in a slightly different way. In terms of lighting, we generally overlight the pedestrian crossings, particularly where it crosses the entrances to Piers 60 and 61, because those are the most active locations in terms of both people and vehicular activity.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Leslie?
Thank you very much, guys, for the presentation. So let me start with this. The Pier 5859 platform expansion looks wonderful. I mean, that is definitely needed. It looks great. The irony is not lost that the back is being widened. Also, I was really happy. I didn't know this, but I was really happy that I didn't realize there was a pilot program in place for this, because I do believe when done right, pilots are super effective because the money goes directly to the institution affected. But I do have to say, now let's move to the outside. When I saw flash on the screen, pedestrian access improvement, I really got my popcorn and took a seat. And I was waiting to see what was going to happen. And then you told us that you were going to remove garbage and recyclable receptacles. And that was it. I'm going to upload one, and I'm going to be a little more skeptical on the widening of that. I do have a question. So this ACOM, when was the study done?
I would have to check the dates, but I believe they did 2 studies. One probably has a 2019 date, and one probably has a 2020 date, and one would have probably a 2021 date.
And
check the files, so.
Is that available?
Well, the trust has them, so.
But, okay, great. And I just want to, was that paid for by the trust or by Chelsea Piers?
Chelsea Piers.
Chelsea Piers.
Unfortunately, Chelsea Piers has paid all costs associated with this thing.
Right. I mean, listen, I think I am going to echo what Roberta said, what David said, what Myrnal said. I just think it's hard to believe engineers can always be counted on to find solutions. And there's so much interior vehicle space that I understand maybe not every single lane will be eliminated, but that some can be diverted into that vehicle interior space, and maybe not the big trucks for the law and order and the production studio. I get that. But anyway, that I will say my piece on that. So I'm just going to go to 2 more points. And I raised this before, but Chelsea Piers, and I understand you guys are a private entity. You're a for-profit. I get that. But it's a little different because you are on this gem of a public park land here. And I think your events and everything that you guys do is financially prohibitive to a great percentage of our residents. I mean, $650 for a soccer class is, most of our kids can't afford that, or families can't afford that. So is there any talk of maybe we can do something that maybe helps out some of those that are really directly in your neighborhood to help that kids who really can't use your facilities?
I think we do engage with the neighborhood, and we have engaged over the years with the Hudson Guild. We run there's 2 pretty significant youth scholarship fund that have been established that, grant several $100,000s of financial support per year to kids in need who attend summer camps, who participate in programming. So can we target additional groups in Chelsea for some of that scholarship funding? Sure, we would certainly be willing to do that. I know Eric has been pretty active in trying to, Erica Bates, who's many of you know quite well probably, in trying to make those connections over the years. So we would welcome to have a discussion on that and how to best connect the kids to the support.
That would be wonderful. And my last thing is, since you are going to have all those parking spaces in there and you are redoing a great portion of the inside there, can we add some electric charging stations there? Get a few of them, stick them underneath there, since everyone who's redoing their parking lots are adding them?
We can look into it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Chris?
Thank you, Martin. Thank you for the presentation today. I hope everybody can hear me. So, Leslie, thank you very much for bringing that up. in terms of electric vehicle charging stations. It's incredibly important that you don't just look into it. This is a park space that you are settled in the middle of. It's necessary at this point. And we all hope that these charging stations are connected to a larger renewable grid one day, but it needs to be done. And if we were looking at this from the lens of a new project, we would be including that as almost a mandatory piece in the lease. We'd be requesting that for. Secondly, you've said that this is approximately a 2.5-year project. Is that correct? In total, all in, between permits and actual construction? David?
Look, I think the interior work, subject to getting the lease signed and approved, is probably 9 to 18 months, and the water work is probably under 6 months worth of work, but the permit could be anywhere from, Noreen, how long is it going to take us to get the permit?
I mean, I would say honestly, 18 months.
Okay.
It's unclear, but it could be that easily. The Corps in particular gets busy with lots of other projects.
Okay, so if you started today, it's 18 months to get that permit. It's a 6-month construction base. Roberta and David are not wrong, and neither is Myrnal, to call out what's being done, or what's not being done rather, in terms of ensuring that pedestrian space is safe. So during this time that we are waiting on permits, and during this time that we're waiting for construction to be done, what is the plan put in place to enhance pedestrian right-of-way and protections on the street-facing side? What is being done concurrently with that on the actual water side? And then my final question, so I won't take up any more time, points 2 and 3 and 4 at the Pier 58 location. Your presentation said you were looking to not have pinch points. I know there's a restaurant there next to the golf club, but that's in fact what happens, is that there is a pinch point that was presented to us in the sidewalk outside of using that parking space potentially for a construction project, loading, unloading space. Is it truly necessary to continue having cars go in and out to the golf club and that restaurant? Can we actually have a clear open space for pedestrian use that isn't impeded by prioritizing cars?
Yes, 3 or 4 questions.
Well, let's start with the pinch point in the last end. Okay, so we're talking about a sidewalk. You said there was no pinch point, so you're going to try to decrease pinch points, but there's absolutely a pinch point at 2, 3, and 4. After staging for construction for the expansion of point 2, can we agree that that parking space is no longer needed and we can expand the pedestrian right-of-way? That's 1.
Okay, the sidewalks through Pier 59 are being widened to reduce and or eliminate pinch points so that pedestrians can flow comfortably and easily through that pier shed. And in answer to your question, can we eliminate those parking stackers? The answer would be no. We require those to support the operations of our businesses.
So you require those, and the operations of your businesses is to allow business operators to be able to drive in to Midtown to then park at Chelsea Piers.
That, for instance, that banquet space, that event space there does a very vibrant wedding business. So if you have a wedding on a Friday night and you have people driving in from outside of the city, yes, they drive in and then they have their car valet parked into those parking stackers, and then they pick it up after the event and they leave.
But that wasn't the case when it was a brewery, correct?
We didn't do valet parking at that time. It was just wide open parking.
Okay, so the use of that and the offerings have been kit gloved up to valet parking and drive up. Can they easily be dropped off outside as I were if I were to use the golf club?
Also, a lot of golfers
Right.
come and park their cars, so.
Right, but you're missing the point. It was, I believe, David's point as well, is we're still putting a high priority on parking in that space when it's going to be an active pedestrian and running location, right? So like, it doesn't make sense because I know the history of that storefront just as well. And so I'm saying I've noticed that there has been a change in operation and a change in use in that was not true 10 years ago. We are now in a place where we are activating congestion pricing. We are asking for a decrease in parking spaces, regardless of whether or not there's 1,800 spaces at Pier 40. Can we agree that if we're widening Pier 58 and we're widening the sidewalks, can't we just make it a true pedestrian access point and not give priority to valet parking and drop off when the whole purpose city and statewide is to decrease congestion in Midtown?
It is a dedicated pedestrian space and it is totally separated from the parking operation. And by the utilization of parking stackers, it's a far better functioning space in terms of moving people through the pier shed than it was when the brewery was there, because people parked right up to the edge of the brewery and there was no sidewalk whatsoever. So look,
Okay, so your priority is to continue that as a parking opportunity, and what you've heard echoed from myself and other members is not to have that a priority. The priority should be given to alternative use, most importantly, runner space and pedestrian space solely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Brad? I see your image, but not you, Brad. Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. How you doing? I'd like to know what the electives think. One, two, it's really a one-way street, and I get the park needs the money. We've asked for green energy. Last time we were told, sorry, can't do it. They have 3 lanes. Sorry, we can't do it, which is unbelievable. And I also think the dynamic of the Hudson River Park Trust and what they've done to activate the waterway is incredible. And I don't think we've looked at building a big U down into the water and around the piers to make that a true promenade and round. What they're offering is walk through parking lots and walk out the other end. I'm there all the time. We're not looking at it as a holistic problem. And to what Lowell said, I don't know why we're not looking at this as a new project. This is a lease. Chelsea Piers can leave and there could be a whole other type of operation there. So we keep getting shoved down our throat that this is Chelsea Piers, but it's a lease and it can be changed. And there's plenty of opportunity and plenty of people that would take over that space and probably even produce even more funds for the park. So I don't really know why we're getting into a lease this long. We've got no green energy solution. We've got no traffic problem that helps the whole west side of Manhattan. And then here we are. We've got some signs and some garbage cans. It's not acceptable. I think it needs to be step back and take another look. It's kind of like what we had to do at Penn Station. This is going too fast, and I think it needs to be step back and take a look. I think Chelsea Piers is a good operator, and I'm not here to, they got to run their business, but we're on the other side of things now. And I don't think we're looking at it as a big overall new project that what could be done. Everything we say, the answer is no. So I think the trust should look at it in a different fashion. And I don't think that's being done. And I'd like to know what the elected officials have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. I don't think we have elected officials here. In any case, I'm not sure we want to put them on the spot quite that way, although the answers would be helpful.
Can I just make one kind of
Yes.
clarifying point, which is, and Brad, I hear you. The current lease extends for more than 20 years more. The trust, as you've heard, did not negotiate that lease. Chelsea Piers came to us with a need, and we looked for opportunities. And on a certain level, you're right, Brad. Like, what we're looking at is whether it makes sense to accelerate certain protections and certain benefits that would otherwise not be available to the park or the public for more than 20 years. And, you know, we've come to the conclusion thus far, because we've been negotiating this preliminary, you know, the draft lease, et cetera, talking to you and so forth, that we think that there are a lot of benefits to doing this. Because notwithstanding what you said, and yes, planning exercises could happen hypothetically, but we don't have rights to just do whatever right now, because Chelsea Piers has an existing lease for more than 2 decades more.
But
So-
Maureen, that's my point. Why are we extending it? I know we have to look at things long-term, but okay, they have a 20-year lease. They want to make a few changes, great. But that also gives us plenty of time and political capital to maybe make a park that goes up and around, and it's still a viable income producing component of HRPT. But we're just extending this again. And then we're really extending it 50 years.
May I?
Nothing more has been addressed. We haven't talked water taxi entrance. There's so much more that can be done, and we're not looking at it. We're really looking at a myopic opportunity. I really feel that way, and I think then what is the need to extend? I don't understand why it needs to be pushed now when it really needs to be studied and readdressed and relooked at what can be done there. And not just Chelsea Piers. So I'm trying to understand why it's happening now, why it has to be pushed on us. I don't understand, Maureen. It's a long-term plan for the park. We're not taking a look at it. So why are we extending now?
Brad, this is David Tewksbury with Chelsea Piers. We look at life from a slightly different view, in that we created and have operated a vital recreational sports complex for kids, families, and adults in New York City very successfully, very actively for the past 25 years. We're the reasons many families decided to stay in the city and raise their families. And, you know, it's a vital resource. You know, most cities would love to have a Chelsea Piers. It's a very, very unique place. If you take it away, it's gone. You can't, you know, you'd never find another space to do ice skating rinks and gymnastics and soccer. It just wouldn't exist. Also, we employ, between us and our tenants, about 2,000 people. Many of those are members of the community. Many of them have been with us for 10, 20, even 25 years. And they do unique things. These are jobs that if you destroy them, they will go away. Also, we have assumed under our lease all of the pile repair infrastructure costs for the entire length of the lease. In the last 10 years, we have spent $75 million basically keeping those piers upright. Otherwise, they would have fallen into the river. We also have maintained and operated in a very nice way over 1 mile of waterfront access for the past 25 years. So you may want to dump on us and say we're awful and shut them down and move out, but we're not such a bad option. And I think you should give some consideration and credit to exactly what we do that is positive for the city, the community, and really everybody who lives in New York City. It's just unfair to bash us. You know, we try to be a good environmentally conscious business in our community. We buy green energy. We look for efficiencies wherever we can. You know, we study solar alternatives. You know, just dumping on us isn't really a productive exercise.
David, I don't think you heard, and this is the point of the conversation. You have a one-way street. We're looking at it a little different. Nobody dumped on you. That's not what I said. I don't think you heard me clearly. I'm saying that the trust needs to look at the property in a different manner. We need to build a promenade around it as a U, which can then be used. And the fact that when you say, I understand that and believe me, I live a block away and my family's grown up there. That's not what we're saying. But what we're saying is we need that lane. And you're saying I need to park trucks there for rent. And we're saying that's not reasonable. That's what we're saying. And I'm saying to the trust, and I know the board, and I know our chair is saying we need more. It's not enough. We can be New York City and we can make something even greater. And we're not saying you're not a part of it. What I'm saying is, though, there are alternatives. And to me, there's no reason to extend the lease right now until there's a big master plan like the rest of the park is done. We've got billions of dollars coming our way, billions. Chuck Schumer sat on our phone 3 months ago and says, I'm giving you $2 billion. Go figure out what to do with it. Literally to our board. So I'm not pushing Chelsea Piers in a bad light. I'm not. But I'm trying to say to the trust, there is more to be done. And you're looking as if you gave us the lane here, I don't think anybody would say a word. So that's my opinion. I think we're rushing into something. We have a great opportunity here to do something different along with Chelsea Piers. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. I'll go to Tina.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I do concur with Brad. I think, David, you've done a great job making this institution a vital place to serving the community, but it is a business. And I think what Brad, from my perspective, is looking forward. Whereas I think, you're taking it as, criticizing what you are and what you have done. And I appreciate Brad's perspective to say, okay, let's turn this, let's look at this as a prism and get different perspectives. And I do think it can be improved upon. I'm going to make one simple request, and I hope if there's designers here that they're not insulted. Just in terms of the use of color and materials. I think this is an opportunity to make it look more sophisticated and less hodgepodge, which it does with different colors and different materials and that sort of thing. So I'm just gonna, speak out about some maybe superficial aspects of it, but an important one because it is a part of the park. And right now it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. I'm just hoping that there's a way to keep its character, but at the same time, fit better within the park. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Lowell, you're up again.
Yeah, Brad, I hear you. And I think Dan would be the first one to say that all of the arguments you were just making, I yelled at him many, many times about. I understand exactly where you're coming from. Where we are now is we can either extend the lease and get some improvements or be stuck with the shit show in front of Chelsea Piers that's there now for the next 20 years. And while I am skeptical this is actually going to put traffic to the water side, we've got to do something because right now it just doesn't function. The pedestrians, the runners, the trucks, it doesn't work the way it is. So we have an opportunity to do something now, and the cost of doing something now is extending the lease so David can go in and refinance his piers and whatever and make more money at this. That's fine. We get something out of it, and that's a shot at improvements. I'm not guaranteeing it's going to work, but it's a shot at improvements. And to David's credit, the one thing that we do get here that is so valuable for the trust, which David mentioned, is the pile repairs. I mean, it was $100 million, $120 million, whatever it comes out to be, down at Pier 40 to repair all those piles. We are going to have the same problem at Pier 76 and having to replace piles because those are wooden piles. To not have to worry about the piles at Chelsea Piers is a huge benefit to the trust as well. And I know that's in the current lease and it's David's requirement to do that now, but it is something that we are getting that is saving us a lot of money. Look, this is not an ideal solution, but it's better than what we have currently. And the cost is extending Chelsea Piers, which is a great resource for the neighborhood that I know my kids grew up at as well, Brad. So I don't like it, but like I said the first time around, I think this is the best we can do right now.
I'm just going to jump in here, Marty, real quick. I think after Brad, we're going to cut. I think we should wrap it up only because we have a big agenda, and I'm sure the Hudson River Park people, we can then discuss on a letter or whatever. But I think, is that okay if Brad is the last word on this?
Leslie, I just had a point to make. There's 2 people in the attending section that have raised their hands, so we could go to them and then.
Okay, can we
So
go to them?
After Alan and Brad and the 2 folks that are from the public, and before any of you speak, since you've all spoken already, I want to ask a sort of a mundane question about the street. I spent a good part of the year before last walking my grandson on that sidewalk, and it wasn't just the furniture that was blocking. It was also a lot of construction and a lot of entrances, people that are blocking the sidewalk as you walk. For their needs at that moment, there were other blockages. So I want to know how you're going to keep the sidewalk clear, that I'm talking about the eastern sidewalk. And the second part of my question is, what kind of signage guidance are you giving to runners who want to go safely through how are you going to keep the runners separated with your signage from pedestrians, or are they going to have to plow through crowds?
David, you want to talk to the blockages first?
The new lease is pretty explicit that we're required to affirmatively not allow the pedestrian ways to be blocked or obstructed. So that just takes active management. And yeah, I assume runners and pedestrians will coexist like they do throughout New York City, throughout the park, really.
But there are, I think that once people make it to the western walkway, there's the arcade area that's semi-protected and has a roof over it. And then there's the exterior portion of it. And one thing that we've discussed internally, as Dan mentioned, there's the possibility of the trust optionally paying for some different enhancements that related to public access. But so we've just internally batted around whether there's some like different runners. We have one on the call from our staff here. Runners are advocates for particular types of surfaces. Maybe there's something that we can do that makes it just kind of naturally more attractive for runners. Martin.
I think also a lot of the running seems to, at least this is by just observation, a lot of the running takes place before 9 a.m. in the morning. We don't really have significant pedestrian activity generally during weekdays until the afternoons, and obviously weekends are busier throughout the day.
I'm gonna call on Alan, and I'm gonna ask Janine to bring the 2 folks who want to speak over, and they'll speak after Brad.
Okay, it's Melody and David, so after Brad.
Thank you.
A lot of good ideas, Brad, and I certainly agree with Lowell's assessment of this. And it all comes down to money. So yes, there's billions of dollars coming in here. I still haven't heard anything about if it's going to come to Chelsea Piers. I think the governor is looking at a lot of big mass transit projects. They're going to take a lot of this money. So it's all about the bucks in a way. And you can't wait for a lease to end and put somebody else in there or somehow cancel the lease on this end. Again, it's not everything everybody would want, but there's some very nice improvements and some good improvements. Chelsea Waterside Park and Chelsea Piers works very hard to maintain a safe and healthy environment for everybody who comes there. Can I take a second to ask Noreen on an update on Little Island garbage?
Maybe Maureen can stick after this conversation and you can do that. Let's stay focused on this one.
Okay.
Otherwise, we're going to be here until tomorrow. Brad?
Lowell, I appreciate what you said. What I'm trying to come across with is that just like the rest of the park, they do a master plan. They study where we're going to be in 25 years. So if we're going now to add that little area on the south side of the building, which walks through a parking lot, through another parking lot, and then through two more parking lots, we need to look at it overall, a bigger plan going around Chelsea Piers. And we're also being pushed around by one TV show, which is one tenant of Chelsea Piers, for that lane. So I'm just not buying the fact that that one tenant can push the entire west side and our access down that road for pedestrians and bikers and the rest of us because of one tenant. So I'm just not buying it. Maybe there needs to be a new tenant there. Maybe that's not the spot for them. I just, and by the way, I don't know how much longer that TV show is going to be on the air. And the other one is one more year. So I'm just trying to understand, maybe that could be looked at in another way. I respect what Chelsea Pier does, but I think HRPT's got to look at a bigger master plan. And we're not looking at that.
Thanks, Brad. Thank you. And I'm going to go to David Warren.
Hi, thank you very much for your time. I wanted to also, I agree with what Brad said. I was a member of the Chelsea Piers, the gym. I had to leave it. It was too expensive. I'm a city worker. So people in the community really can't afford your facilities. And I'm probably a middle-class person. And your gym was just to use your pool and all that. It's just too expensive. And I'm a neighborhood person, just out of my price range. So I don't know what to, I don't know what a hockey game would cost me or whatever, but probably people like me couldn't afford it. But my question is, and it's more of a point of information, and I don't know if it's related to this, but the community board, I believe, is on record to supporting creating a bike lane in part of the West Side Highway where the motor cars are. How will this plan, if at all, affect that? Will it have no effect on it whatsoever, or this plan will put that into jeopardy? And that's what I'm concerned about. Thank you.
I'll jump in there. I would say that, with this community board, with other community boards, with the advisory council, there's been a lot of discussion that Hudson River Park has been in the room for about desires for the State Department of Transportation to take a fresher look at the existing Route 9A corridor, which was ahead of its time and certainly ahead of its time for the bikeway. But now that the bikeway is so very busy all the time, there's a lot of interest in what can be done to expand it. I think physically, if the state were ever to take the collective suggestions from so many community members up on this kind of idea, every entrance to every place west of the park or west of the highway would have to be relooked at and re-engineered. But I don't think this plan makes it impossible to do that. I don't think it helps it. I don't think it hurts it. I mean, I'm not an engineer. I'm from Hudson River Park Trust, but there are a lot of driveways and other intersection points along the whole corridor, including at our offices here at Pier 40. And I think, as with the current situation, it would be a matter of designing an interface where vehicles can cross over an expanded bikeway, which is the hope that a lot of people have. I get that. So, I mean, I hope answers your question.
Thank you, Noreen. Thank you, David. Melody.
Hi, thank you for your time today. So I also really am enthusiastic about the idea of taking a lane from the West Side Highway. CB4 voted for that, Transportation Committee and the full board, I believe. You know, so there's this one big studio that has two big clients. And what if those clients change? What if that studio turns into something else? There's disruptive technologies we didn't even see 10 years ago. There are other competition out there. And then, you know, we're not going to have the need to park all these trucks. What happens when congestion pricing comes in? Because it's going to. It's definitely going to happen. And then we're going to have the space, but we'll still be stuck with this old idea for 44 years. You mentioned also that there are crashes, you know, your fear of crashes on the West Side Highway and what it would do to your business. And I'm here to tell you that there are crashes on the Greenway with bikes and pedestrians all the time. And furthermore, it's kind of an equity issue because e-bikes are now not allowed on the Greenway because there isn't enough room for everybody to navigate. And so deliveristas, that's their only place to be safe. They can't ride on the Greenway. The only people, you know, who can really enjoy this amenity are people who can pay for it. And you're on public land, and the West Side Highway is on public land, to my knowledge. And I just think that this really has to be rethought. There's a lot of other people with other needs besides drivers and besides big trucks. When you look at what they're doing around the world, it's so much more creative. It can totally be done. You know, people are going underground. I know it's an investment, but we have to invest in the future. Cars are not the future. Anyway, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comment, Melody. I appreciate it. That brings us to the end of this conversation, this presentation. The question that remains for the committee is, I mean, this cries out for some kind of a letter of remarks, and I think it's going to be a difficult letter to write. Or do we wait for the significant action to have started before we write the letter? Because Hudson River Park Trust and Chelsea Piers have certainly heard our comments from opening up the roadway to keeping it clear, to reducing the choke points, to rethinking the overall ball of wax, to doing more green, to putting in charging stations. That's sort of the list that comes off the top of my head. I need guidance from committee members as to what our next steps are. And I think I'll go to Leslie first.
Marty, I think we do write a letter. I think it's somewhat of a deny unless, not those terms, but that type of thing. And I just wanted to say that Brad makes an excellent point. And Noreen, you probably know this. If there was just one lane taken away, this would not even be a discussion. Out of the three, if it was a 2-laner, that's fine. If it was 1 lane to widen, I have a feeling this would all go away. It would be such a great compromise. One lane, 1 lane. But anyway, Marty, I think we write a letter, and then we list a lot of the stuff that people have concerns about. And I think it is going to be a difficult letter to write, only because I think there are varying degrees of how people feel.
1 lane.
Brad.
I just want to.
Your point for the letter, Brad, is new overall thinking. It's not just the 1 lane.
Yeah, the short term I'm saying is 1 lane, and we're being dominated by one tenant that seems to be dominating wide Chelsea Piers. The other thing is HRP to do an overall study of how we can expand around Chelsea Piers, make a big U that comes off the promenade, which is so great, and it could be fantastic. And that could be our long-term plan. That's what I'm saying. Thank you, Marty.
So the issue here is that Chelsea Piers is going to sign a new lease at the same time that they are making improvements to the through passage of their facility. That's the quid pro quo that I'm hearing. And we are seeing that the improvements for the new lease are not sufficiently expansive, and that's captured by the one lane comment. Am I right? Are you agreeing with what I'm saying? I see a couple of heads nodding.
I think that you mentioned the list, Marty, the EV charging stations, the forward thinking, that everything, you have it written down. Yeah. And not to one lane, but remove one lane to make it 2 lanes.
Leslie, Marty, I just want to, on the process piece, I know you guys talked about the letter. I just wonder, maybe we can talk a little bit about what our significant action process is and sort of like the steps that we are going through here. Because I think you guys can sort of submit as the committee's comment. You can submit whatever you guys want to do as the comment for it, rather than apart from it. So I don't know, Noreen, Dan, you guys want to talk a little bit about
Yeah, sure. So just to again, recap, when we do so we expect that most likely tomorrow we will be posting the full draft lease for you to review. We've given you as best we can the digest, and we've certainly been very candid about some, the issues that we thought you would care most about in advance of starting that, because we wanted to be able to give you as much time as possible to consider this. Our process will be to post the notice of the hearing, which will be in late-ish March, at the same time as we post the draft lease. You will be able to send in written comments. You'll be able to testify at the hearing, and we will be able to come back to you at your March meeting again if you'd like, to discuss anything. And so basically, the point of tonight was really just to do what we do, which is give you a chance to have that informal conversation with us, separate from the formality of that public process.
And would you say more about the timeline on that public process, please?
Yeah, so by statute.
Does the clock start tomorrow?
Yes, probably the clock will start tomorrow. Our statute requires a minimum of 60 days as the public comment period. And as it requires that we not hold the public hearing any earlier than 30 days once we've started the clock. Our public hearing will be more than 30 days once we've started the clock. And effectively, in a sense, you could say we've started the clock because we're here talking to you about a lot of the details of this. So the public hearing would be late-ish March. The written comment period would extend for approximately 30 days beyond that. And so you'll have ample time to write, talk, whatever you decide you want to do.
Public hearing, end of March, written comments are not due to the end of April.
Right, and then once the comment period closes, we will be reviewing all of the comments, obviously, that come in, making our board aware of all of the comments that come in. Typically, there are many of them that are participating along the way at various hearings and community board meetings and so forth. So they know, and we provide updates in between. But ultimately, the decision here is with our board of directors. Staff would recommend the position, whatever that may be, after the public process. And, at the moment, the consideration or the plan is to consider the draft lease.
Thank you, Noreen. I have to make a couple of comments about what the committee's process can be. This is not a letter that could be crafted over the next weekend. I think the letter that we're talking about and all the points that you all have raised needs to be constructed sequentially. First draft, comments on it, revision, and so on. And that's going to take a little while since this is a complex issue. I don't have any sense of the timeline on that, but it's constrained by what you've just said, Noreen. Comments from the committee? I see no comments. I think that we will write a letter and that is there anybody that's opposing the letter? Let's be clear about that too.
Marty, just to reiterate, I'm present, not eligible.
Yes, I know.
I feel very sensitive on that point, so.
That's fine. You can't vote for this, but so you're speaking up doesn't mean that you're objecting. It means you're not saying anything. That's fine. That's what you have.
Brad has his hand up. Brad, go ahead.
Brad, I didn't see it.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, what do we want to speak to Senator Hoylman way before we write this letter? I'd really like to get them to weigh in on the process and their thoughts. Because this is, a state issue. The trust has to do what they need to do financially, and Chelsea Piers does also. I just would like to hear their thoughts on what should be done there. And if they feel, which we all like the promenade, but what their thoughts are on getting us a lane.
I think Leslie and I need to at your suggestion, need to make an arrangement to speak with Senator Hoylman. And we might do that in the next week or
Brad,
so. We need to write a letter first.
Yeah, Brad, I think we can do that, but I think our thoughts should be in a letter. Regardless, I mean, we can definitely push them to, or ask what they think, but I don't know if that should influence what our letter says or what the people of this committee feel, but that's my thought.
A little bit different than what you said, Leslie.
And I think we need it before the hearing, actually. So I think we need a letter.
I just want to flag on timing. So I think, and Noreen touched on this. This is time to. We're here today to do sort of the initial presentation on the details. The formal process kicks off tomorrow after this. You do have sort of the March meeting of the committee, so you can have time to read the lease. Noreen's offered us, the trust happy to come back to answer another round of questions, engage with you guys further before that, before the public hearing, sort of at the end of March. And then also, although again, you could also submit the written comments all the way up until the end of April. So you have at least 2 full boards and possibly as many as 2 more committee meetings before the comment period closes.
I actually think, Robert, that the committee's timeline is more compressed than that. I think we need to craft a letter. We need to have the letter revised at least once. We need to take that letter at Brad's suggestion and speak with Senator Hoylman and see what he says about our comments. He may influence what we want to say. He may not. That's slightly different than what you said, Leslie. The committee's feeling should be in the letter, but if somebody makes a good suggestion, we should be sufficiently flexible to take that suggestion. And showing it to the senator would open the door for that. Go ahead, Leslie.
Okay, I think we're going to write a letter. We'll take all these into account, right? All the points. And I think everyone agrees on that, right? That we're going to write the letter. We'll do it now in this cycle, and then move forward from there.
Thank you. I think we should move the agenda.
Great.
Before we
Thanks,
let
guys.
Noreen go, Alan had a question for her.
Yes, he had a question about Little Island garbage.
Yeah, Alan, it's basically to disappoint Brad again, the same plan that we discussed the last time. Their Little Island explored or has been exploring kind of in what form the kind of bins, if you will, would potentially be designed so that they are attractive. That is something that we want, that you want, that Meatpacking wants, etc. So they went out, they did some measurements, they got some general pricing, and there's no specific kind of pattern or design yet, but they have a sense of order of magnitude of what it would take. And the plan is still to proceed with that, but I haven't seen a pattern or a design or a color or anything else like that yet.
Thank you, Noreen.
Brad, is your hand up again?
I just want to say to Noreen, she's 99% doing fantastic. Come on now. Thanks, Dory.
Thanks, Brad.
What? You didn't give her the other 1%, man. What's wrong?
I'm holding out for the lane and the bigger field. That's what I'm holding out for.
Okay, good man. Let's move the agenda. And thank you for the presentation. I think this has been a rich discussion. You certainly, David, you certainly have a sense of what the committee feels about the road that you say can't be changed. And I think you've seen some pretty strong comments about that.
Okay, thank you, Martin, and thank you all for your time. And I do hope as you deliberate and collect your thoughts and write them down, you do give, reasonable consideration for the many positive things that Chelsea Piers has brought to the community over the years and, has very much intends to continue to do. So thank you again, appreciate it.
David, just to pick up on what you said, you should be clear, several people have said it. This committee, I speak for the entire committee, is very appreciative of what Chelsea Piers has done over the years. Thank you very much. That doesn't mean we don't have some comments about what you want to do now, but thank you for, we've all walked it. We've all appreciated it. We've all had, well, I had beer there when it was there to be there, but whatever. Thank you.
I was going to say, we've all been carted out of there. No, I'm just kidding.
Again,
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We appreciate that, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we get to talk about poop. Oh, no.
No.
We got to talk about organics recycling. Have you been listening to this entire conversation?
I have.
Well, thank you for being very patient because it was a longer conversation than we anticipated. A rich one, but longer.
Not my first rodeo, no worries.
The floor is yours.
Great. Just getting comfortable. Hello, my name is Ali Gumas. I'm with the Department of Sanitation. Specifically, I work as the manager of the drop-off composting program. But for the past 3.5 years, I've also been working on the curbside composting program. So that's the brown bins. I'm coming tonight to speak a little bit about our progress on expanding the program since we got some of our funding restored back on Earth Day of 2021. And then also to just let you all know what some of the options for you to compost in your neighborhood are. I also want to preface this by saying we as a department have been working closely with new council member Eric Botcher, who's clearly very interested in expanding compost options. So I'm pretty optimistic and hopeful that we'll have even more options for your residents soon. So I was told not to have a PowerPoint and I prefer it that way, but I am, without a chat, I'm going to be referencing links so I can send in a follow-up tomorrow so you can see. But nyc.gov/curbside composting is really the landing page of everything I'm talking about. So if you're interested in pulling it up as I talk. So as I mentioned, our funding for the curbside composting program was taken away during the beginning of the pandemic. And we were very excited to hear that it was returned by the former Mayor de Blasio on Earth Day of 2021. What that meant for us is that we had to switch up how we were doing things to be a lot more efficient, both in how we were rolling out the program and how we were providing the service. That means that we switched entirely to a sign-up based model. This is nothing new for Manhattan residents, but this is hugely different for residents of the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and parts of Staten Island, who previously just got a bin delivered, got told what day of the week they were getting collection, and that was that. It was pretty frantic for our outreach team back then to try to contact every single resident all the time to tell them exactly what that bin meant. But this time around, we have definitely gotten a lot of signups in Manhattan, in CB4 specifically, and that bodes really well for how soon you'll get service. So because of the way that the funding was restored, we're only able to expand a few districts at a time each month. We've taken a brief hiatus for the winter. As you know, sanitation is responsible for snow operations, and I've got my colleague from the Bureau of Community Affairs who can talk way more about snow and general garbage and recycling pickup, but I'll stick to composting for now. And I lost myself, snow operations. So we will be continuing to add new routes to new districts starting April.
which is very exciting for us, which means there is still time to sign up right now if you haven't already for your building. A big problem we have in Manhattan is that we have lots of interested residents, but for buildings with 10 or more units, we do require the approval of an authorized rep. So that could be a superintendent, that could be a board member, a building manager, anyone with decision-making capabilities for the building. We do this for a number of reasons, mostly to make sure that we're not stepping on any toes, creating work for people without them knowing about it, and causing confusion. We want this to be a program that people are participating in willingly, happily, and knowingly. So it also gives us the opportunity to talk to the people who will be directly touching the bins and rolling them out to the curb each week to make sure they know what to keep an eye out for and when to contact us. Maybe if bins are overflowing and they need more, maybe if they need clarity on what day of the week collection is, etc. So just a brief recap, with the brown bins, we as a department provide them for free to the buildings. There is a cap, but I've yet to see it get reached. So if you have an apartment building with 30 stories and you think one on each floor would make sense and help your residents participate, we can accommodate that. The brown bin collection, the frequency is reduced from 3 times a week previously to 1 time a week right now, but we're hoping with some feedback and some extra funding, we'd be able to expand that back again. To make up for this, we are able to offer more bins. So if your building has the space for it, we'll give you more so you don't have to worry about keeping that material and opening and closing it throughout the week. The bins themselves, hard, thick plastic, specifically designed to keep rodents out. They have a latching lid that shuts, and ideally when your residents put their waste in, they can close it again, keeps the odors in, the pests out. Definitely better for rat mitigation than just plopping a black plastic bag on the curb every week. And every single piece of food that you put on your plate can go in that bin. So that is meat, your bones, your dairy. This is vastly different than your community compost sites or your drop-off composting sites. They're often more limited in what they can accept because they're not processing at an industrial scale. Sanitation has all this machinery to help us get through all that material and make sure that the compost we're producing is safe and we can burn away all those pathogens that come from your decomposing meat. We also accept food soiled paper in those bins. So your greasy pizza boxes, your coffee filters, paper plates and napkins from a picnic, all of that can go inside. And of course, BPI certified compostables. So that cups that get you every time, they say they're compostable, but they feel like plastic, we're able to take them, they break down. And of course, to come full circle, the Department of Sanitation makes this compost and then also distributes it. So our larger give back events are currently on pause, but we are able to do events with elected officials on a smaller scale than we were before. We're hoping to roll that back out in fiscal year 23, which would be this summer. So there is a link if you go to nyc.gov/curbside composting. That's where you can sign up. The form takes somewhere between 30 seconds to 2 minutes, depending on who you are. If you are not an authorized rep, we ask for that contact information. So you can give us your superintendent's name and phone number, and then our team will make that sales pitch to them, talk about some of the common myths and barriers to participation, maybe talk them out of it and do some of the convincing. Of course, a big incentive is the rat mitigation, but another one is the bins have wheels. So if your building staff is hauling bags out each week, it can often be easier on them to just be able to roll it out. And another big incentive is, as I heard you all reference New York in the 80s and 90s earlier, and as recycling was being rolled out, DSNY also used to provide free recycling bins. As you know, that's not the case, but we are in a beautiful time period right now where we are providing these bins for free. And we really hope buildings can take advantage of that and participate while it's a voluntary program. There are no fines associated with the program because it is voluntary. And until we're citywide, I can't imagine that will happen. So this gives you a good chance to get those behaviors down, build those habits before the inevitable that I think is coming, which would be citywide curbside composting. There is a link you can click on the right navigation side of nyc.gov/curbside composting, and I'll send it in the follow-ups. And you can track the number of signups by community board. So CB4 is doing very, very well. I would say top 5 on the number of households served. So of course we have to keep track of low density and high density differences across all 5 boroughs. So a building of 300 units is just one address that signs up. So it would be equal to a single family home, but we also have to take into account just how many more people that would serve. So the Department of Sanitation looks at both of those metrics when we decide to go where to go next. I believe that's all. I'm going to monologue at you, but I will take some questions about it if you'd like.
Thank you for that quick overview. I have a comment. I have a comment and a reaction, and then I'll open it to all the hands that are bound to go on.
Okay.
I live in Penn South.
Great.
There are 2,820 apartments in Penn South. Penn South has been told that they won't have curbside pickup of organics because there's not enough interest in the neighborhood. You just said that there is enough interest in the neighborhood. It seems that the department's standard answer to we can't do it now is that there's not enough interest in the neighborhood. It would seem to me that the department is making a serious mistake giving that, and it should be talking a little bit more about when and how the recycling will begin. On the second part of this is, I reacted really strongly to your statement that there would be only one brown bin collection per month for a complex like Penn South.
Per week.
Per week. I misspoke. For a complex like Penn South and for London Terrace, who is also interested in having these pickups. I know this because I've spoken with Penn South management, and they have said that they have spoken with London Terrace. So I know that there are two very large complexes right in our neighborhood that are interested in collection. Once a week isn't going to be sufficient. Putting out that much compostable is going to cause odors, even though the brown bin's locked down.
Okay, I can start with enough, and I'll agree with you that it's definitely been some confusing messaging on what it means to have enough interest. So as I was giving your overview of where we're at with interest in your neighborhood, I'm saying you have a lot of interest, but as you'll see on those graphs, there is less interest in Community Board 4 than there was in the other districts that have since started service. We give you a breakdown by the percentage of households that have signed up, and previously we were showing by raw numbers, but I think that ended up being confusing. So to say enough, we do, when you sign up, send a monthly update that gives you the status of where you're at. Are you starting service next month, or are you still on that wait list? The language in that email is very vague, and my team is working on breaking it down to 5 separate emails to talk about the different reasons you might not be getting service. The reason Penn South has not started service, along with the entire community board, is because as an entire district, there has not been enough. Like I said, enough, very fuzzy wording. I see how that's not helpful and has caused some tension. I've definitely talked to management at Penn South, and I know they're big supporters of us, and we are excited to get them started again. But one large apartment complex was not enough for your entire district. We need more large apartment complexes, and that work is definitely being done. I have site visits in your neighborhood next week, and we'll continue to do that. But I am pretty optimistic that you will get service once we resume expanding, which would be in April and potentially May if it came down to something that I can't predict, like another large complex in another district tipping that scale. So that's why I'm hesitant to provide a timeline, and that's why we haven't provided timelines, is because a large complex can come on board in any district and can really tip us over. So it could really look like Manhattan CB4 is going to get it, but if at the last minute Manhattan CB5 gets 5,000 apartment units signed up, then it's just, it's not right for me to give you a projection that I can't stick to. So springtime, I'm optimistic for. Anything more than that, I don't think I'd be able to predict. As far as once a week collection, I will say that nobody wants it more often than I do. It definitely makes my job a lot harder to explain to people that they're going to get less of a service than they had before. And I'm really hoping that a lot of this initial feedback, as we regain a lot of the participation we had before, would be able to demonstrate that up. So in requesting more bins, in voicing these complaints, I'm going to keep reporting that up. And I'm really hopeful that as we talk to more council members, as we talk to a new administration, that we can advocate for some of those resources we had before.
I know you're saying all that you can say, but I consider that a really weak answer and a vague answer, and frankly, an unacceptable answer. Leslie.
Thanks, Marty. I am also going to echo Marty. So this is a big deal for us as far as the environmental bent of not just this committee, but our community board. We were extremely, extremely disappointed when it was taken away, and COVID was used as the excuse for it to be taken away. And we understand there had to be cuts somewhere. But the way that we're saying that it's reinstated, it's not really been reinstated. It's putting the onus on the people to call you guys up to say, we want composting here. And a lot of times, as Marty said, and I live up in the 50s, and we had a number of people on our block separately call up for composting interest, and they were all set. They all were told there is, quote, not enough interest in your neighborhood for composting. So there's this, yes, call us and we will compost. We will, come out to you and service you. But then they're telling us, no, there's not enough interest. I think we should have to flip this script. I don't think we should put the onus on individuals or buildings or anything. I think the city should take a lead on this. I know it's not you. I know, it's greater. There's greater forces here at play. But we are severely lagging behind other big cities like San Francisco or Boulder. I mean, they're up to 80% of organic. The numbers are staggering, and here we are begging for a brown bin. So that's the first thing. Marty was right. The not enough interest. And by the way, if Penn South doesn't have enough interest, I don't know what blocks are going to have enough interest, because they're a city of their own.
It's Penn South and the London Terrace together. I mean, it's a huge, two huge complexes.
So
Go ahead,
actually,
Becky.
London Terrace actually has not completed their sign up yet. So that's also probably a big factor. So we're meeting with them and we're talking with them, but that could be a big reason. This is a good example of when we need the sign up from the authorized rep, it can be a big holdup, and it doesn't necessarily reflect the entire interest of the community board district. Also, as far as blocks go, we're only looking at the community board level. So absolutely, I can't agree with you more that we would get a stunning amount of participation from Penn South, because we did previously. We got nothing but support from their management, from their residents. We've worked with them quite a bit. Even this winter, we weren't able to provide fall leaf collection to a lot of districts that previously had brown bins, but Penn South specifically, we organized a special leaf collection for them. We're able to divert 3.5 tons of leaves from Penn South. So trust me, I know that there's tons of material to be gotten, and I really hope we can get it and we can keep working to get it. But I did just want to touch on one of the things you said about why we're doing the sign-up based model. I would love citywide. I would love for my job to be more education and less begging people to sign up. We're not there yet. I really hope I'm here long enough to see it. But a big criticism we had of this program before the pandemic was that we were running empty trucks, was that not enough people were participating. People didn't understand it. People lost their bin and didn't know how to get a new one. And at least with the sign-up based model, we're able to say, look, Manhattan CB4, there are thousands of residents that will use this bin if we get it, instead of just having a bin delivered and having it go unused and having to backtrack and talk to 8.5 million people.
Allie, I do understand that. Absolutely. And again, it's not you, but this is the impetus, this is going to spark our letter, our conversation. This should be required by law. I mean, that's just how I feel. I think it should be required by law. I don't think it should. I think when the city said we're bringing it back and this is how we're doing it, I think everyone would have been cheering in 2013. Yeah, okay, but we're way ahead here now, and I think we're way behind the times. Did you guys do any direct outreach to big buildings or big complexes? So say, hey, you guys have to compost, and we're going to help you. Or can you just give me a little insight on that?
The first line of outreach we did actually around spring, when we were first establishing these new systems to accommodate signups, was reach out to all the buildings that had previously participated. So Penn South was obviously one of them. So it's Stuyvesant Town and Manhattan CB6, a lot of those large apartment complexes. We've also specifically targeted property managers, building managers that oversee many buildings, so we could have one really productive conversation to reach thousands of people. We did a round of meetings with elected officials to get some of the contact infos for those larger buildings or community groups that could help us spread the word. And this was all before the sign up form even went live. Now we also have an outreach team that does in-person events. Of course, there being 15 of us is not enough for the entire city, but we show up. We do our best. And we're still working on filtering through all of the form responses we get to say, call my super, and hopefully that can have a domino effect. You know, oftentimes you have one conversation and it does affect multiple buildings.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we could talk about outreach more, but moving to, is it true, did drop-off points, are they being taken away from parks? Or no? I just want a clarification. I thought I saw that somewhere, that the Parks Department said they didn't want as many drop-off in the parks, but I could be wrong. That's why I want to ask you.
Okay, sure. All of the drop-off sites that were open before the pandemic were asked to close at the start of the pandemic due to budget reasons, safety reasons, before we really understood how COVID was spread. We now have more sites than we did in March of 2020. Many of them are not at parks, unrelated to any conversations with parks, mostly related to staffing and bin management. If we are working with community partners, we'd like them to be present or being the steward for the bin to help us make sure that we're not collecting a ton of contaminated material. So I don't think any new sites have been closing very often, especially since March of 2020. We've had a handful of sites close, but it's been completely unrelated to the Parks Department, mostly volunteer support shifts or construction.
I also had a question about the funding. What's the percentage of reinstated funding from original?
That's a great question. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I can include it in my follow-up.
Yeah, that would be great, just so we know what we're working with now. And the other thing is Hudson River Park Trust, who was just here actually, as you saw, on an unrelated matter. They just started this really, really wonderful model, which is you can click on a composting site and see how much material is being collected, where, when. Have you guys thought about maybe some sort of interface like that or using something like that?
We wouldn't have complete data to do that because we do work with some smaller community gardens. If we're not collecting it, we don't have the means of getting how much tonnage they collect. Some do, some independently have scales. We work with them to maybe provide them the materials, but some are just unwilling to do that. And we don't want to ask more than we already are. And as far as collecting tonnage from specific sites, I think there's been a lot of variability over the last year and a half, especially. Some sites really exploded. Some sites have really declined, maybe based on how people were moving around or finding new ways to compost or giving up altogether. I really hope it's not that, but it's possible. So I guess I'd have to figure out what average to do, but certainly open to the idea of making the map more user-friendly and more informative. That's something I've been working on, adding search functions, creating more of an identifier for some of those volunteer run sites so they can get either support or acknowledgement for the work they're doing.
Yeah. I'm gonna let other people speak. I think we have to be less apologetic about people composting and more, this is a fundament, this is what we have to do now moving forward. But anyway, I'll see if other members agree or disagree.
That passes it over to Roberta.
Hi, Allie. Thanks for being here. Super exciting. I was super thrilled to see both sanitation funding relatively restored and then the return of this composting program. I wanted to highlight kind of an issue. You're probably aware of this dynamic, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts about ways we can kind of work with this. So within CB4, we have a lot of fairly large market rate buildings. And over the past, 9 months, we've just seen a ton of turnover, partly related to just really high percent year-over-year lease renewals, partly as a sign of recovery from the pandemic. But that's created a good amount of instability, certainly for CB4, probably for other neighborhoods with similar housing typologies, like Midtown and Central, and then on the east side, I'm assuming as well. I'm curious how, given that instability for folks, myself included, who are market rate tenants in larger buildings, what can we do to push toward this kind of enrolling curbside composting, where we're not really sure if we're going to be within our buildings and going to be able to be that ally that's needed in order to shepherd forward the composting program. And I'm just one of such people, but I'm guessing there are probably hundreds, if not thousands of us. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, lots. I think our team is really interested in shifting this narrative away from please do it and more to this is an asset for your building to have. You should look, ideally when I'm looking for a new rental, I would like to move to an apartment that has this service. And I really hope that can become a selling point. So that's definitely a small part of the conversations we have with some managing agents to work on what is it like for the quality of life in your building to receive this service and to have these bins. But also, I think we deal with turnover in a lot of different ways. There are some buildings that are renter only. We do recurring outreach events. So even before the pandemic, we would go on maybe twice a year or even more if it was requested. Maybe there was a particular month where they got a lot of new tenants. We would table in the lobby or do a Zoom presentation like this and make sure everybody just knows the basics of what goes in this bin. And we really want it to be more of a universal symbol, right? I think a lot of people who have lived in the city for the last 10-ish years can identify the brown bin and know what goes in it. It's not always true for some of the younger millennials and Gen Z folks who move into these districts, don't really understand how to recycle, don't really understand how to compost. And we just want to make sure that that messaging is everywhere. Lots of visuals directly on the bin itself, as many face-to-face interactions as we can have, and boosting more on social media is another big way we're getting some of the younger crowds that is maybe moving around more.
And I have a somewhat unrelated question, but that you may or may not be able to answer. But I live on 9th Avenue, not terribly far from Penn South. And on 9th Avenue and around 28th Street, there is a church called Holy Apostles, and they are a large social service provider. They have a large collection of brown bins, and they've been sitting there for the longest time. And I've always, not always, but as long as I've been able to recall, wondered, is there any way for that to serve as a potential drop-off site, either for folks within Penn South and the surrounding area? Are those bins available? I'd love to understand that a little bit better and see if there's any way that resource, that community resource can be leveraged in order to drop off compost for the Chelsea and maybe even Southern Hell's Kitchen residents.
Yeah, absolutely. Holy Apostles, if I'm remembering correctly, was formerly a drop-off site before the pandemic. Since service isn't in this area and we're not able to pick up, they're not right now. Given that they have such a large amount of brown bins, I am hopeful to look out for their enrollment and touch base with them and see if they're open to becoming a drop-off again. It's a big part of the work my team is doing right now, especially in districts that get service or maybe about to get service. We're on the lookout for a lot of these community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, nonprofits. They're all eligible to sign up. It's not just for residential buildings. They're eligible to sign up whether or not they choose to be a drop-off site. But because we are faced with the reality that some building managers are not open to the idea right now, or that district, or that maybe another building is just slow to it, that they're on their way, we want to provide as many drop-offs as possible. So I've got a working list. I contact those sites independently. Similarly, community gardens as well, they fall into that bucket. And this is true for a building or any site. Once they receive the brown bin, the Department of Sanitation won't take it back. And you shouldn't distribute it, because then we are faced with the issue of somebody calls and says, I have a brown bin, why aren't you collecting it? And we're like, how did you get that? So we like them to stay on site. We like sites to label them so they don't go missing during collection. But those are just gonna stay there until service resumes and we can get them back on board and hopefully collecting from the neighborhood.
And just a quick follow-up there, have you been able to engage Holy Apostles? I only ask that if there's any way to be proactive about that, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, there is, and there's more than one of me, so I haven't specifically, but maybe my colleagues have. So this is true for all of you. I'll definitely I'll spread around my email as well, but if you have questions about your specific building, maybe the status of its enrollment, or if there's something that you can do or that we can do to help you get your building manager on board, you can use me as a resource, and either I'll do it directly or pass you along to someone on my team.
Super helpful.
If you would send that information to the CB4 office, is that all right, Janine? And that information will be relayed to every member of the committee.
Perfect.
Is that okay with you, Janine?
Yeah, that's fine. You can send it to me and I'll forward it.
Great.
Thank you. Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, for the presentation. I just, 2 or 3 questions. I'll do it slow this time. I was pretty fast in the last presentation. So does Park Slope have composting?
Yes, Brooklyn Community Board 6 was the first one to get.
Okay, Brooklyn Community Board 6 has it, but in terms of density and volume, Manhattan Community Board 4 doesn't. There's more families living in this community board than there are in Brooklyn Community Board 6. The priority is off.
Okay. So
No, hold on. So I'm just saying the priority is off. No, this is not, that's a comment. So you answer my question with yes. So first, the priorities are way off. You prioritize single family homes in Brooklyn Community Board 6 before prioritizing a community and a CB that is generationally and environmental justice zone, because we deal with a boatload of varying pollutions and we are typically starved and underserved for city services. So thank you for answering that question. 2, Hell's Kitchen has lots of tenement apartments. Many of the tenement building owners do not live in New York City. I and my neighbors had signed up the 9 buildings that my management company owns and operates on 47th Street. The owner operator, the owner doesn't even live in New York, and the management company, they are not using their city office right now. They're living outside of New York City. So when I received an update, it was, we've reached out and there was no follow-up from the management company. So, maybe next time around in April. Insufficient. People want it. I know that Manhattan Plaza wants it, and Manhattan Plaza was told that they needed sufficient interest in the program. How do we hit critical mass if DSNY is reaching out to building owners that are not truly invested in the community, right? So like 1, the priority was the single family homes, it should be here. And 2, what is critical mass if Penn South, London Terrace, Manhattan Plaza are being told to wait, and tenement owners don't live in New York City, are just ignoring calls or just not responding negatively to a composting request by their tenants? What's the critical mass here? How can we change it?
Okay. Let me start with the top. The Department of Sanitation services all 59 community board districts. So there is always going to be a back and forth dynamic between high density neighborhoods and low density neighborhoods. If you look at the graphs on the nyc.gov/curbside composting, you will see that overwhelmingly high percentage of that district. I'm not here to defend why Park Slope started first, and I think that there are lots of good arguments for why they shouldn't have started first. But if we're going by raw numbers, they had an overwhelming amount of interest very early on. For a lot of the higher density districts, it took us a few months to build some of that high volume approval. Like I mentioned, London Terrace is one of those apartment complexes that has not formally signed up yet. So they're not currently factored into your account, into your district's evaluation. So I just wanted to say that we have to look at both. That's why we show both graphs, and that's why we take both into account. Upper West Side, they're a high density district, definitely not a lot of low rise buildings, and they started service the month after, or 2 months after Park Slope. For that very reason, we are looking at both, and we have to continue to look at both. So we don't just give service to all 12 Manhattan districts and then go to the other 40 something districts and say, so sorry, there are just more people there, so we had to. We have to go by interest, and we can't just ignore the low density housing. We're trying to balance that. I hear you that it's insufficient. I agree. I wish it never went away to begin with. But I just have to say that in defense of having some low-rise districts in there, we do have to serve a lot of people. And these decisions are hard, and they automatically mean excluding an entire community group or many for a few more months. And that's why we're trying to go based on numbers and numbers alone, and looking at both of those categories of numbers to make sure we're excluding at least as reasonably as possible. And as far as owners go, I hear you. My landlord, my building owner does not live in New York. My superintendent lives nearby, and that would be sufficient. Board members would also be sufficient. We don't have, I think whoever is actually taking your trash to the curb would be sufficient, is another way of saying that too. So there is an option on the form to say that you are the waste manager. And if you're the one who would be taking on that work, then you could get your building service. If your building has been told something specifically that doesn't line up with that, shoot me an email and we'll figure it out, because it doesn't sound like you shouldn't be eligible. And the third is, I guess we should just.
Okay, thank you.
What's that? Oh. As far as.
I said, oh, thank you.
Sorry. Overeager on Zoom. Critical mass goes, I think we're talking about London Terrace. Usually we don't name buildings by names, but I think a lot of you are involved, and this has been pretty well publicized with your council member as well. I think these are going to be having London Terrace come on board is going to be a huge tipping point for your district. But also, I rarely get to come to these community boards and share good news of, it looks like you'll get service in the spring. Most often I'm saying, I don't have a good timeline for you. So I am deeply affected every night that it has taken us this long. And I agree with you ideologically, I think based on everyone said. But you're all familiar with city government. So I'm not asking for your personal sympathies, but I know that you know that this is an uphill battle and will continue to be for quite a bit. I am really motivated by seeing how interested and passionate your community board is. Hearing you talk about a letter, I think that can go a long way. I mean, you absolutely know the impacts of that. And I would encourage all of the advocacy you can give us, because we're doing it ourselves on and off the clock.
So would you repeat something that you just said? Did I just hear you say that you brought us good news because you're promising something like April? I know you're not giving us an exact date, and that is more positive than you brought to other places?
I'm not saying that it's good news. I'm saying that there is a spectrum, and I'm often disappointing people since the pandemic and since we lost our funding. And I'm pretty optimistic about this district. So I'm coming to this with a cheerier disposition than I often am able to.
Alan, thank you for that response. Alan.
Thank you. So I'm the waste manager in my building, so I guess I'll sign us up.
Great.
But Leslie, to your point about parks, I think we had a situation. I think you're right. We had a situation at Clement Clark. I think we wanted to put a bin there, turned down for it for some reason. So this would be a good opportunity to reach out to parks, ask them about this, maybe get somebody in next week. This could be a great educational, hands-on education for the kids that use the park and for the parents that bring the kids to the park. And, this could go a long way by getting some sort of organics program in the public parks. Parks may be, weary about kids dumping them over or something like that, but making them secure should be something that could be easily done by the park. So maybe we could reach out to parks and get them in here and, try to get some action in there. Thanks.
I agree, Alan. I also think in our letter, we should say that every park should be a drop-off station.
With a daytime education program.
Allie, we're shooting for the stars here.
I'm with you.
We're going for it.
Just a quick question about the park-specific drop-off centers. So the ones at Hudson River Park Trust, are they they're run by and collected by the park and then composted at like 31st or 32nd Street?
Correct.
And then what is being proposed, or what we would advocate for, would just be that it would be DSNY's particular program, but in Parks Department, City Parks Department parks.
Yeah, I would say that probably a big reason why the Parks Department doesn't have more drop-offs is because it would likely end up being sanitation or one of our 8 nonprofit partners that we work with that would be responsible for helping them process the material. So not all parks have a composting operation. That's a big reason why they're not drop-off sites. But I'm thinking Matthew Palmer's Park in the 40s. They are a drop-off that we have opened in partnership with the Lower East Side Ecology Center. So they're the ones who provide the hauling for that site, and that's why they're able to collect there. So the bins are stationary at the park, but it's a joint effort for sure with a nonprofit, with 2 city agencies, et cetera. I mentioned some of our drop-offs are just entirely community hosted, community processed, a small community garden that collects from their neighborhood and then makes the compost right on site. And then there's of course the other end of the spectrum, which would be the Holy Apostles, which would collect the material, sanitation would collect it, and that's that. We can't do that. We can't run a truck to pick up from a park or a church at this point because there are no DSMY organics trucks in the district. But once service starts, we should be able to add more of those.
Thank you. Candace, yours is the last, and then I have one comment to make, and then we move on from there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is getting late, guys, but I did want to think, I was kind of want to echo what Roberta was saying about all these high-rise buildings that we have. Can we talk to maybe the land use? And once they, when we prove these buildings, be like, you need to have, the organic recycling as part of your agreement with the trash, because the land uses are agreeing to do certain things with the recycling programs. So can we try maybe talking to land use to maybe put it into their wordings when they're approving things? Also with the food halls, that we have a couple of food halls in our area now as well. Is that a program that we're going to put into that? Can you go into the food halls and put in the brown bins into that area?
Can you explain to me what you mean by food hall? I don't know if I'm familiar with the term.
We have over at the Moynihan Train Hall, there's going to be a food hall in that area. The Chelsea Market is a food hall as well. Those big areas. Also on the new Pier area, on the Google Pier, that will be, I think, they're having a food hall as well down in that area.
Are you saying food hall like HALL?
Yes.
I'm so deep in sanitation, I went HAUL, but I see.
Yes.
So sanitation would be restricted to only servicing the waste or the food scraps of residential nonprofit city agencies. So the train station perhaps would be a public space that we'd be able to make that work. But I know a lot of those food halls are private businesses. They'd be responsible for their own carters. There is a list out there of private haulers who would offer a composting or a food scrap collection. I encourage any businesses that get to me to look into that list and explore an option where they're able to pay for a similar service, but where the material actually gets composted.
Ali has just explained to us one of the really confusing issues on solid waste management in the city of New York, that is divided between residential and commercial. And the line is rarely crossed, and the measurement of the waste that comes out of the city is confused because of that. We know how much residential waste there is. We're not so clear, correct me on this, Ali, but I think we're not so clear on how much commercial waste, although we know it's a lot.
Correct.
Marty, really quickly, I'm just going to say, I'm wondering if we should write Google and see what they're doing with the food waste at Chelsea Market. Light a fire under them.
Isn't that taken by the Hudson River Park Trust composting? I think that might be a different.
Chelsea Market? I don't think so.
Oh, Chelsea Market. I'm sorry. I thought you meant the
57 will
Google,
be, Leslie. Yeah, 57 will be, but Chelsea Market, I have no idea what they do with it.
No, yeah, they wouldn't. Yeah.
Let's put Google and let's light a fire under Google in Jamestown.
I got my Googles confused.
Maybe also the food hall. There's a new one at Manhattan West that might be of interest as well. Is that for NATO? I can't recall.
Yeah, that's who is that? I'm drawing a blank, but it's not Grenada.
Gotham.
Silverstein? Gotham is on, isn't that?
Isn't that on 11th? Gotham, the big one on 11th?
Yeah, that's a different one, but that would be another potential. But
is that possible, Jamestown?
Where? Which one?
Market.
Yeah, Jamestown. Chelsea
Market
is Google/Jamestown. Manhattan West is Brookfield.
Brookfield.
So there are two letters going on here. I want to ask a final question of you, Ali, and that's the funding. Bring you back to the funding question. I saw a document that came from Manhattan Solid Waste Management Board, and in it, they are saying that the department in the city is chopping back because of the budget cuts. Now, I don't know if that's old news or new news. So would you review what you said? It was a document that came out today or yesterday. The funding has been reinstituted for organics recycling by Mayor Adams, or you said Mayor de Blasio reinstituted and Mayor Adams is carrying it forward?
That's my understanding. Yeah. Yes.
Is there a threat to your funding?
Oh, I really hope not. Not that I'm aware of. It was done by Mayor de Blasio on Earth Day of April 2021. So just 8-ish, 9-ish months ago.
I'm wondering why Schwab is saying what it said, but you have no way of knowing.
I haven't seen that yet. Maybe I'll have more information. If I do, I can include it in my follow-up. For now, I did just want to jot down. I want to make sure I have the right question to follow up on. And it was, what percentage of our budget was reinstated of the original budget? Is that correct? Okay, great.
And when you find out something about what Schwab is talking about, that would be.
Yes. Yeah, I've got a MSWAB question mark written down.
We're writing a letter?
Me? No,
No, you're
No,
not.
I would, yes, I would definitely suggest writing a letter
Who?
to our electeds. I think to, if organics under, wherever the organics, I guess it would be sanitation committee. Ally, is sanitation, the sanitation committee also takes, right, on city council also takes care of organics.
Yes, that would be the same.
I'm guessing. So, and then also DSNY, obviously, I would suggest on what we talked about and kind of raising the bar on what we expect and outreach and I think sorry, go ahead, Marty.
Raising the bar would mean outreach, shorter timeline, and more frequent pickups. Is that what
Yeah,
you mean?
I would suggest we even go so far. I think we say parks for pickup. More of an incentive, direct outreach to buildings. I think I'm freezing up.
Well, nonprofit drop-off sites potentially as well. Yes.
Did you freeze up? No. Did you get to finish your sentence, Leslie?
I'm sorry, I think I froze. I don't know if you guys can hear me. I'm freezing up.
Now we're hearing you.
You're okay.
Oh, great. I was saying, I think we should mention about drop-off points at parks. That we don't like the sign-up based model. Direct outreach to big buildings and big, facilities, more of an incentive. I think there are a lot of points that we can put it as far as pushing the envelope. And of course, fully funded.
Okay,
Marty, I can write that one if you want.
love it.
Okay.
Anything else?
Ally, thank you very much.
Wait a minute, before we finish that, do we want Ally to stay on the next item? This is.
Sure. I was thinking, and I know Marissa's here. I want to see I want to get the temperature of the committee. We have our next item is big. It is recycling. And then we have dog poop, maybe not so big. We did not, sorry.
It depends on the size of the dog.
We did not expect the Hudson River Park Trust discussion to go 2 hours. So I don't know how you guys feel about tabling the other two, but I will leave it to the committee. I do not want to shortchange recycling, especially recycling corner bins, but I will leave it to you, Marty, and what the committee feels.
I mean, it's 9:30 or it's almost 9:30. Which one of those is short? Is the dog waste a short conversation?
The dog waste will be very, very short. I can promise you.
I won't say that shitty, but I'll accept your promise. Let's do the dog waste. Let's, if we can and can arrange for a rescheduling on the recycling, since that may not be short. And Marissa, I'll take your guidance. How does that make sense?
I would second that.
So do you want to comment on both of those things, Marissa?
I will do, I will talk about dog waste because that's just an enforcement issue and I think that will be very quick. But for the recycling, I would have to defer to Ally on that. And I think that is a much bigger conversation at 9:30.
Can we reschedule it for next month, folks? I don't know.
Well, we could talk about that later, Marty, but Marissa, I really appreciate your understanding on that.
Yeah, of course.
Ally, you want to chime in?
My note on dog waste would be, please don't put it in your brown bin once you get them.
And about postponing the recycling conversation.
I'm comfortable with that. I believe, and her name is slipping my mind, Kara from Sims. She's speaking in the future? Yeah.
Yes, that's why it would be good to marry.
Yeah, it would make a lot of sense.
Exactly.
I'm comfortable with that.
Let's do that. Okay. All right, let's talk poop.
Okay, cool. My name is Marissa Yanni. I'm the Manhattan Community Affairs Liaison. I was asked to talk about dog poop laws. So you have to pick up after your dog. Your dog needs to be leashed unless you're in a dog run park, and the leash can't be more than 6 feet. I will say regarding enforcement, because I'm assuming that's what the conversation would be about, enforcement agent or supervisor has to witness a person not picking up the dog poop. So you can tell me or submit a 311 that says, you know, Miss Jane Doe, she never picks up after her dog. Every day she walks him at 5 p.m. and she never picks up corner of 14th Street and 9th Avenue. You can totally tell me that. We can send an enforcement agent out there. If we don't physically see her doing it, we cannot issue a ticket. And then let's say we do see her doing it. We find Jane Doe, she doesn't pick it up. We follow her down the street and we corner her and we're like, we're going to give you a summons. She has to provide her ID. If she does not provide her ID in order to receive the summons, she will not receive a summons. So that's why I assume this would be very quick, because unless we see the person doing it and they give us their ID, we cannot issue a summons or really enforce then the law. And that's basically it.
So wait, if I'm stopped because I don't pick up after my dog, and I refuse to hand over my ID, I get away with it?
Yes.
Okay.
Does that sound weird?
Very.
It does. That is, you have to show your ID. That's the only way we can write the summons, because we need your name and your address.
So what have you've obviously been thinking about this? What has your thought about policy and mitigation of this moving forward been?
That would have to be a completely different change to the way we do enforcement, or that would have to be a law change of how we can issue a summons. If that means we don't ask for an ID, we just see a person doing it and then we just give them a ticket. Because I think also with all notice of violations, all summonses, you have to be able to fight it. And on the back, you kind of get that information from oath about how you can fight it. So all that would have to change in order for this law to change. So I think that would be something that comes legislatively or from our legal team even. That is something you could request. But I have not seen a rule change like that. The only thing I've ever seen change is the amount of the summons.
Alan, do you mind if I just jump in real quick? I just want to do an overview here. Marissa, thank you for that and the enforcement, but I think we're thinking a little bigger. I just want to ask you a question. Do you sense, and I think we all do over the past few years, that for some reason there has been more poop all over the place? I know I've had a dog ever since I've been in New York, and it seems that it's getting incrementally worse. what is there? Are you seeing that? Is there a reason for that? I'm seeing more articles on it. I'm seeing more complaints about it. And I just don't know if that's what you guys at DSNY are hearing as well.
I have not been hearing that personally. I haven't personally, I haven't received any of those complaints about like excessive dog poop on the corners or anything like that. I don't know if the Parks Department might be receiving more if folks are not picking up after their dog in parks, but I'm not saying it doesn't exist, just that I personally have not been receiving that. And in my office, that's not the main point of conversation that we've been having about the amount of dog poop in the city. Maybe more people got dogs because of the pandemic. That could be one reason. And these might be brand new dog owners and they don't know how to take care of animals, specifically in a city, specifically in Manhattan, where there is
Right, well,
not
that actually
as-
brings me to my next point. I'm going to let everyone else ask questions, but I think we are going to, or someone will definitely put on the radar, and we'll talk about it, about some sort of educational PR, some sort of campaign, a creative campaign, pick up after your dog. Like, we were saying that they used to have those in the 80s or whatever it was. And, I don't see it now, but anyway, I'm going to go to the rest of the committee.
And I'm going to ask that no more hands go up. The last speaker will be Roberta. It's Alan, Brad, and Sally. Alan.
Thank you, Marissa. So what you're saying is it's up to the public to get an inspector out on the street to do some visuals, or do you still have inspectors just nonchalantly walking around and observing areas that may be getting some phone calls and maybe getting some 311s?
Yeah, it would be both.
Because I don't see any. I used to see inspectors around. Many years ago in Queens, I got a ticket for that. People used to, walk around, kind of like, and it's not like they always gave people summonses. They would speak to them and say, listen, this is what you got to do. Next time I see you, you're going to get a summons. As far as giving summons, I was always under the impression that you could write a summons on a dog's license.
I have not, that piece is not, that I do not know. That I've not, from what I've understood from our enforcement division, is that you have to hand over your ID in order to receive a summons for this specific violation.
Okay, so I mean, the license is owned by the person who owns the dog, who may not even be walking the dog. So you have dog walkers who, right. So could we find out, or could you look into the fact whether or not the law allows for summonses to be issued through the dog license, which a lot of people don't have dog licenses today. So that's another problem, because they leave them off the leash and the dogs go around, do their business, and the person walks away happily ever after. So a lot of it is that there's nobody on the street really, making people aware that what they have to do. And that's something that's been slowly, inspectors have been slowly disappearing from the scene, on the dog scene, and inspections of other areas. But specifically, I don't see anybody anymore. And I think, that needs to change. It really does.
Yeah, a lot of our inspectors are diverted because of COVID to do COVID related enforcement.
Okay, let's stop with the COVID, please. We have a problem with dog shit on the streets. That's a problem. And this has been going on much before. No disrespect, I'm sorry. But everybody refers to post-COVID problems now, but we've had these problems in these areas. These are very, intensive areas. There's a lot of people walking dogs all over the place now. God bless them, that hopefully they get them from, orphanages or wherever. But, and they're giving dogs a home. So that's the main thing, but they need to take care of them. And sometimes, and as Leslie said, we need to get a major educational program out there. These people just think they can just walk around and forget about it. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Brad, and Sally, and Roberta. Brad.
Yeah, I think the chair hit on what we were saying. We're looking for an educational campaign that's on New York 1, that's maybe in a subway on a sign saying, hey, it could be funny, and it could be to point out we all deal with it every day. And I'm not looking to give people tickets. I don't think that's what we're saying at all. In fact, I'd rather have the money go to an educational campaign. I think that's all we're asking for. And we would love to be a pilot program for the Manhattan Borough President's idea right here in Chelsea. So, maybe we could just start small and see what happens. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
And
Brad.
Hell's Kitchen, and Hell's Kitchen.
All at District 4, Leslie, sorry. I was just simply thinking a few blocks or some.
Just around Brad's apartment.
You can't take yourself from that one. That's all right. Brad, you're good. I would have done the same thing. I live in Chelsea. Sally?
Yeah, so I'm just going to support what's been said. I actually, in my immediate neighborhood, we started talking about this a couple of years ago, doing a fun marketing program, but this should be a real blitz. I do think it should start with a pilot program, but it can be, as I said briefly in the beginning, I mean, people don't even know what it means to curb your dog. I have stopped people with them, forget cleaning up, with their dogs pooping, right in front of my building and saying, you should curb your dog. They don't know what I'm talking about. And again, I agree. Trying to find people is like, and the enforcement, it's like catching the bike rider on the sidewalk. I mean, there's nobody that's going to ticket the bike rider on the sidewalk. I mean, they're going to be riding on the sidewalks forever. And the chances of the right person catching the person that's not cleaning up after the dog is minute. We really need a fun promotion. We can have it on public radio. We can have signage. We can have. It's all soft cost and it's all education. It can be done in the schools. It can be done everywhere. So that everybody is finger pointing to everybody who's not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And it can work. It'll take a little time, but it can work. And I want to add, unfortunately, the increased amount of what we're calling dog poop, I think, unfortunately, is a lot of human waste also. I mean, we're seeing a lot of waste on the streets. It's coming from the homeless population, because I've seen them going to the bathroom on the sidewalk. That's where they have to go. So it's a huge problem. But I think it can be fixed, at least for the dog side of it, with a big community effort, without too much money spent.
Thank you, Sally. Last words, ma'am. Roberta, you're it.
I have to ask, how many citations does DSNY actually issue, maybe in a given month or year? How effective is this at enforcing anything at all? I'm just curious.
How many summons we give out in total or just for dogs?
For dogs specifically, yeah.
I will have to get back to you on that answer. I wasn't able to check in with the enforcement director today like I wanted to, but I can follow that up with an email.
Sure. Do you have an opinion on if these enforcement actions are particularly effective at causing people to curb their dogs? I know that that's a very subjective question. I'm just curious.
Well, I will say it's kind of hard to get somebody and then to have them give your ID. So I can't imagine there are too many of them. But if you get hit with one of those fines, I'm sure you're never going to forget to bring around a plastic bag again.
Thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Next move on this issue.
To wrap this up, Marty, I would suggest we do write a letter. I really like the idea of, why don't we get some local artists? It's just some in our neighborhood, just fun stuff. Like Brad said, a fun, light campaign. And like Sally said, and make it like, hey, you know what? Local artists come on or at whatever, try and get a campaign, do like a little contest. And it can be like the new 80s of, curb your dog or bring your pooper scooper.
Is this a letter to the council member? And is the funding through him for a campaign for the participatory budgeting stuff that he has to learn how to do?
I mean, it could be participatory budgeting, but that wouldn't be our avenue. I think this is to DSNY, and I don't think it's a very involved letter. I think it's just wrapping up what we said here.
Okay. Any objections to that letter?
Gwen, you have a hand up?
Wait a minute. I'm trying to get, am I off mute now? No.
Yeah, we hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking they did a campaign a long time ago about this, and somebody ran for mayor about it, and I'm thinking it was Giuliani. And if you could get Giuliani to do a spot for it, it would be hilarious.
In so many ways, but you know what? I think it was Milk in San Francisco. Actually, he ran on clean up the poop and won in California. But yeah, Harvey Milk.
Thank you, Gwen.
I don't know if that's who you were thinking about, Gwen, but
I don't think so.
sorry. Brad?
Sorry.
I was just going to actually say what Glenn was going to say. I think it should go to the mayor because this is a good quality of life issue that can be handled in a lighthearted way, and that helps politically too. So I think it should go to the mayor. Thank you.
Sounds good to me. Ready to write that one too, Leslie?
Sure.
And then we should talk. Maybe we talk tomorrow about letters, you and I.
Sure. Sounds good.
And we talk about when the recycling conversation is reestablished, and we need Janine's help with that. Is there any reason we should prolong this meeting any?
No, Sally has her hand up.
I'm sorry, Sally, I apologize.
It was just a quick follow-up to Brad. I mean, going to the mayor is great. I'd rather try something small, like in the district, get the support of, Eric, of Eric Bacha, make it a real small community effort. Again, a pilot program. This is a very big city. It's a very big city. But if we can be successful here, and we can come up with some, and I agree, I don't know who brought the idea of local, there's so many local artists that might want to do the work, pro bono. Their work will be out there, there'll be signage, it'll be fun. And if we can be successful in a community, then we can go to the mayor. That's my opinion.
We could ask FIT to put together something in their visual arts program. She's here every week, every month she's here.
Absolutely, you're right. Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Well, you're writing the letter, Leslie. What do you think?
Sure, I agree.
Okay, so you and I will talk tomorrow. Thank you very much, Ali and Marissa. You've helped inform us about difficult things. You've also taken and you've done it gracefully. You've taken some of our ire. Thank you for being here, and thanks for playing with us. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm sorry, before everybody goes, I didn't get a vote count for the previous letter on composting. So if there's any objections, abstentions, or present not eligibles. No. Okay.
I think nobody objected. I did ask the question.
Okay. Thank you.
Instead of voting, going through the roll, I asked for objections and assumed the rest.
Okay. Yeah. No, I didn't hear that one. So I'm sorry.
And of course, Mr. President, not eligible, Lowell, on the first item that has to be clear.
Yep, I got that one.
Good.
Thanks, everyone.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Good night. Thank you for participating with us. See you next month.